Is it just me, which it may well be? Is it just me, or even this time of year when, some of the main teams of our focus, now I'm not talking about Indiana and Purdue basketball, which obviously played this week, but is it just me, or are the weeks flying past, which is not a bad thing, don't get me wrong.
I think they're going by a little quicker.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Now,
I agree with you.
I have not said this. This is the longest that I've gone without complaining of this in probably the previous 52 years that I've been on the planet. And I'm very proud of this, but that I managed to go this long without complaining in this regard. But Eddie, do we have the hallelujah by chance? The hallelujah. Do we have the hallelujah sounder, the rejoice sounder? Hallelujah. When we next see one another, January will be done. We are at the tail end. We can see the checkered flag on the month of January, which is the longest, most drab month of the year. And the weather hasn't been terrible. I get it, right? But it's been kind of a yo-yo month in the world of sports around here. Yes, forever we will talk about the fact that this January was the year that we saw the impossible. To quote Vin Scully, in the year of the improbable, the impossible has happened when Indiana wins the national championship of college football. But outside of that, the Colts, that your NFL team is stuck in a rut when really the only topic of conversation is about who's going to be their quarterback and which coach potentially leaves to go to another opportunity. And that's been kind of the storyline revolving around the Colts. Now, yes, we'll get into, as we get closer to it, with the draft and, of course, there's no first-round pick, right? But what can they do in the later rounds and then with free agency? Because free agency is going to be interesting for them because they have some decisions to make. And then, of course, on the NBA side of things, you have the aspect or the factor that the Pacers are, again, I talked about it yesterday. It is kind of bizarre, and I'm appreciative of it or grateful for the fact that there have been years in the past where the Pacers have had struggles and literally they are completely out of sight, out of mind, and off the radar altogether. And there have been years, I'm thinking of the, right after the brawl, for example. There have been years where it was like, man, did the Pacers play last night? And totally out of sight, out of mind. They are having a historically, by Indiana standards, bad season in the win-loss category. But yet, it does still feel like, I still see people, and people will say, like, hey, can you get Pacer tickets, this and that. It's still a thing. Maybe I'm living esoterically within my own bubble. But I think it's because, Eddie, as we've talked about, I think people realize, and there's been enough body of work evidence now to know that there is still optimism and excitement because we know tangibly of what they're going to be theoretically when everyone's back. The one thing about this season that I think we've learned more, and I know this is not going to be a popular opinion. Eddie, you can feel free to disagree with me on this because you're wearing your Zoom Baby shirt and you are the producer for the Pacers radio broadcasts.
Okay.
The departure and the method of the departure were not popular. I get it, with Miles Turner. But I also think, even though he is not exactly setting the world afire in Milwaukee, at least I don't think I think he's basically the same player he was here, maybe even reduced a little bit, and clearly that thing has taken on water, and it's a disaster up in Milwaukee.
Yep.
But having said that, I do think that we can appreciate, and I don't mean appreciate like 2, 4, 6, 8, who do we appreciate? I just mean appreciate like we can recognize that he did and does bring a skill set to a game that was critically important to the way Indiana wanted to play.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as we are looking at it in anticipation with the trade deadline coming up, Thursday of next week?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
So with the trade deadline approaching in the NBA, theoretically, that's where you're going to get the Miles Turner full-time replacement for 2 reasons. The first being the center position is one that requires the most acclimation in the NBA, especially the center position the way the Indiana Pacers want it played in the system we saw a year ago. And I've mentioned this before, but Miles Turner is a rim protector. That we know. And Miles Turner, a lot of what Indiana wanted to do, especially when they first started playing with the up-tempo with Halliburton, is having Turner protect the rim and then facilitate for transition going the other way. And he would be the trailer coming down, and he would hit threes if they come down and they didn't get something in transition right away. Boom, you back it out, and then he can hit a three as he's trailing at the end. If that three's not open, then he's up at the high post, and he begins that weave that they run. And he did it very, very well. Probably almost to the point of like underappreciated how well he was able to orchestrate that. And so that, the cerebral nature of that, the cohesive nature of the way that this offense and the Indiana Pacers require their center to be kind of that, like I talk about, that backyard sprinkler. Spreading the ball around from the high post. Miles Turner did that very well. And when you get a player that you are asking to do that, it's going to have to be somebody who has a little bit of experience in the league, no matter how gifted they are coming out of college. And so, therefore, a veteran is what you need at that position. And Bennedict Mathurin, who's a wonderful player, what he brings to the table, an isolation set scorer that isn't, and I'm not saying Mathurin's not part of their offense, but Mathurin, again, is the one part of their offense that they can go to when the offense isn't running. Mathurin's the one guy that they can say, okay, who can we just use in isolation? Ben Mathurin. So when they do that, that is a position that is easier, I think, replicated by somebody in a plug-and-play situation of, I know you were just playing last year at Kansas. I know you were just playing last year at BYU. I know you were just playing last year at Duke. But we're going to put you in this spot, and when the ball comes over to you, ISO and do your thing. That is a quicker study. And that's why it would seem as though the center position you're going to have to go out and get through free agency. But the point that I was going to make here, Eddie, is I think we've now learned that the players that can do what Miles Turner did to the level of effectiveness that Turner did, while we can be upset about the reasoning and the way and the fashion in which he left, the reality is he did leave a void that leaves you a very finite selection of people that you can go out and get to replicate it.
Yes, I mean, there's not many other bigs out there that can do what Turner did for the Pacers. And if you're thinking about it, well, there's Joel Embiid, there's Nikola Jokic. Like, those guys are different. Like, they are the superstar you run the offense around and run it through, not the guy that, helps facilitate the offense. And so when you look at it, it's like, okay, that's a very hard thing to replicate. Is there anybody out there who can, is young that has that kind of skill set that can do that? Or is there somebody out there who you can find that is a really, really solid defensive player who can play above the rim, who can protect the paint, and who can rebound? So like that those are essentially the two options that the Pacers have with how they want to approach the center position. And a guy that I really like, Jake, is a guy that is going to be playing in Gainbridge Fieldhouse tomorrow. Onyeka Okongwu with Atlanta is somebody who I think makes the most sense for the Pacers because the last year and a half he's been, a 35% 3-point shooter, and it's a relatively new part of his game that he's starting to develop, and he's taking more threes this year than he has in any other point of his career. He's a very good defender. He's very athletic and mobile. He can rebound. So the question is going to be, does Atlanta want to move off of him? I know they've recently inserted him into the starting lineup. And so that's a big question there. I know Ivica Zubac with the Clippers has been linked to the Pacers. Daniel Gafford with the Mavericks. They have a lot of different options, and optionality is a word that, Kevin Pritchard likes to use. So it'll be a fascinating next 6 days for the Pacers.
Could they go, if you get Tyrese Halliburton back and you get Obi Toppin back, and you've got Nesmith, you've got Nembhard, and let's say that you decide to keep Mathurin, could they go as is next year and have Jay Huff as their starting center?
No.
Now that you did not even hesitate on that.
Yeah, I did not hesitate.
Because you don't trust him for full stint defensively or offensively, or both?
Both. I don't know what I'm getting from Jay Huff on a night-to-night basis.
That is fair.
And then that's why I would
relegate 3 threes to start the game. That we know, right?
Yeah. He was out of the rotation there for a couple of games, and then he plays 24 minutes the other night in the return home after the road trip, and it's just it's very hard to predict what you're going to get from Jay Huff.
You know what's fun about Jay Huff?
Yeah.
He dunks like the players in double dribble.
Also, he's got one of the worst. His hands are awful. He cannot catch any passes in traffic. He's going to fumble it.
Did you ever play double dribble? Probably a little before your time, right?
Can you elaborate?
Double dribble.
Double dribble was a Nintendo game, and when it came out, it was all the rage because with double dribble, and again when you'd start it.
Double dribble.
When you would start double dribble, you'd just be playing a regular game. But if you got into a certain spot and you went up for a dunk, it then went away from the game and it showed the isolation of a player dunking, and they all dunked like Jay Huff. It was pretty awesome.
Now, did it have this?
No, but they had the same narrator. The narrator of that, which of course was, yes, that same person. They had the same ability. See if you can find double dribble. It's got to be on there on the tube of views. It's got to be on there, the double dribble. But Jay Huff dunks like those guys on double dribble used to dunk. That part is cool because it would just blow you away. You're like, oh my gosh, I got the reverse 180 dunk. Awesome. And we thought the graphics were unbelievable. I mean, it was completely captivating. And when I was in college, we actually had a league of everybody on my dorm floor. We played a season of double dribble and a season of Tecmo Bowl. And when we played the double dribble, when we played that, there was a guy on my floor that figured out a glitch in the system where he could steal inbound passes and hit threes, and he beat me 182-0 in a game. Okay. One more time, please. Okay. Now, can we compare that? That's a guy, and his wife was the narrator for the pole position, right? Is that right? And then he would say what after that? Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's later in the evening after they met right there. At any rate, the Pacers and Atlanta coming up, and we're actually going to talk to somebody from Atlanta because I'd like to know a little bit more about Onyeka Okongwu. I have a hard time saying his name. Onyeka Okongwu. Who is? I mean, he's a great player. I've followed him. I mean, he played at USC.
Onyeka.
Okongwu.
Onyeka Okongwu.
Okongwu is what I'll say.
There you go.
And I don't mean to make fun of his name. It's I mean, there are certain names that I trip over, as you know. But when he came out of USC, I mean, he was a top 10 pick, was he not, Eddie? He was a lottery pick, and it was only 5 years ago, and he has developed. So that leads to the question of why would Atlanta make him available?
They're in this spot, Jake, where it's they're teetering on play-in.
They've
play
always
off.
been in that spot, right?
Exactly, yeah. So it's just like,
Are the Atlanta Hawks the last 10 years the Indianapolis Colts of the NBA? They had kind of a year where they surged into the Eastern Conference Finals and everybody got excited. And then they came back right after that and kind of never followed through. And they had one big player that everybody was excited about. It didn't work out, even though he had a lot of talent.
he was the 6th pick in the 2020 draft. He's 25.
Okay. Man, that'd be nice.
Mm-hmm. He just turned 25 last month, too.
Onyeka Okongwu.
Yes, there you go. He's day to day. I don't know if he's going to play tomorrow or not. I don't know if you saw this. He lost 3 teeth.
Yeah, he had a tooth procedure.
Yeah, he lost 3 teeth in their win at Boston on Wednesday.
Did they find them?
They did, yeah.
Okay. Vern Fleming had that happen. Vern Fleming was driving the lane against Shaq once and had all his teeth knocked out. No thanks. Not good. Also, the Colts phone has been ringing, right? I don't know that we discussed this yesterday, but this to me is peculiar. And Eddie, I think you actually figured out the reasoning. But Jim Bob Cooter, the greatest name in all of sports, who is and has been a well-respected coach.
Better than Bismack Biyombo?
Excellent point. No, Bismack Biyombo just happens to be my favorite player. You know why he's my favorite player?
Because his name's Bismack Biyombo.
Because his name is Bismack Biyombo. That's a good point. But Jim Bob Cooter's pretty hard to beat, right? I mean, Jim Bob Cooter does sound like he would be an auxiliary character in The Waterboy. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But he is a well-respected coach to the point now where both two teams in the NFC East, Philadelphia and the New York Giants, both have interviewed him apparently for the offensive coordinator position, which is the exact same title that he holds with the Colts. So the question then becomes, why would the offensive coordinator of the Indianapolis Colts, and does it signal, and before we get to the answer here, you think to yourself when you see the headline, okay, wait a minute, the guy is the OC for Indianapolis and would be interested in talking to Philadelphia or the New York Giants about that same position. And then you think about it. You're like, okay, where's your money going to go further? Indianapolis, Indiana? Philadelphia or New York? Well, Indianapolis, it goes a little further. Because why not Indiana? Why wouldn't you want to live here, right? How about the weather itself? Well, the weather outside, a little frightful, not great in Indianapolis. But then you look at it, every single game you've ever watched after Halloween that is in Philadelphia or in New York with the Giants is 40 and raining. Ugh. Right? Nothing says depression on a Sunday night like the end of some NFC East game between the Commanders and the Giants in New Jersey. Or the Cowboys and Eagles in Philly. It's dark by like 3:30 in the afternoon, and it's this misty rain, and it's an acid rain nonetheless. And I do love Philadelphia, and I do love New York, by the way, both as cities. But you get my drift. Now, Eddie, you cracked.
What if I didn't get your drift?
Then you'd be stuck right there without a current to sweep you down the river. You actually gave me, because I said, why? I asked that question when I came in. Why would you go for a lateral movement from one franchise to the next?
Let me ask you this. Would you also, like, number one, obviously, for Jim Bob Cooter would be, if he's leaving the Colts for another OC job, it would be to call play somewhere because he's not doing that here.
That's it. Bingo.
The other part that just hit me that I did not tell you, job security. Like if you leave now, you're probably going to stay at your next team for what, 3 years? Where right now, you don't know if you're going to have a job at this point next season.
Yeah, I think Philadelphia probably has a slightly less security than New York because New York obviously just made a new hire.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. That whole situation with Philly was fascinating to me. Like, obviously there were people out there, candidates-wise, that did not want to either A, work with Nick Sirianni, B, Jalen Hurts, C, A.J. Brown, or D, all of the above.
Right. But yes, excellent point. Now, we know in terms of, and the other thing is this with Shane Steichen. Very good offensive mind. Calls the plays, and there has been discussion that perhaps it is time to relinquish that responsibility. It is difficult for a head coach to have play calling responsibility, I think, during the course of a game because they have so many other things that they need to be monitoring. And one thing you can say about Shane Steichen, this point was made to me yesterday, Eddie. I'm cruising along, minding my own business, just a dude walking the street, even though it was chilly outside, just getting in my steps, right? Just like they say in What's the Story, Morning Glory, just walking along, listening to the sounds of my favorite tune. And I got the AirPods in, I'm walking, and all of a sudden, my music and my tune gets interrupted by the buzz of the fact that I've got a message on my phone. And I look down, well after we were on the air yesterday, and I look down, and there's the message. Jake, have you ever noticed that Shane Steichen speaks in QR?
Okay.
QR.
Okay. We're not doing this again.
Speaks in code. And I'm like, you know what? I knew it. I knew it. Took off. The 6-7 is so yesterday. And all the kids now are saying QR. And it started right here.
No.
You're part of a
Nobody is
movement,
saying-
Eddie. You're part of a revolution.
No.
Well,
Nope.
like I said, either get the drift or be stuck in the river.
What?
But
Why
this
would you not
this channel's moving towards progress,
Why
buddy.
would you say we're not talking Morse then? And you can make an acronym out of it.
What is this, 1950?
Movies, like outside.
What are you, G.I. Joe?
Restaurants, sports, entertainment, or education. There you go. We're talking Morse.
No, that's G.I. Joe stuff.
No, I don't think it is.
What do you I mean, you getting messages about
You can
like,
also say we're talking
something
Da
from the war?
Vinci.
Okay, that's fine. But, see, and again, I applaud the effort here, but it's not trendy and catchy.
Neither
like
is
the 6-7.
QR.
Oh, no, QR is just like, QR is the alphabetic cousin of the 6-7. Because numerically, 6-7 goes in order, and so too does QR. And QR is a little more, you like QR. You have to say it afterwards because it's just like the 6-7. You got to say them in order. But the kids, Eddie, I'm not the one. I can say something that becomes a trend, but I'm not the one that decides whether or not it takes off or not. I just
You're the one who's trying to get it to take off. What do you mean?
There's no trying to. Here's what I did, okay? I laid down the Q, which was like a little pile of brush. I laid down the R, which was like a Zippo lighter. It's the kids that came and hit the flint and then brush fire. It's off like a brush fire. I just simply introduced it. The kids took off with it. And again, I mean, I get it. No offense. You're not as hip and trendy with what the kids want. So I get it. I mean, no offense. It's cool. But Shane Steichen does speak in code, does he not? Speaks in the QR.
Mr. Garrison, please make it stop.
Who's that from?
That's from Nick.
And I'll bet Nick's over 45, isn't he? We're young in the audience is what we're doing here.
I don't know the age of Nick.
Okay.
James texted in, oh, goodness, here we go again with this QR.
See? Who said that?
That was from James on the text line, yeah.
Yeah. Listen.
Now, this guy is automatically thrown out because he shares the same last name as you. He said QR rocks.
Yes, thank you.
Nope. Thrown out. Shares the same last name.
Yesterday when we were talking about, and I'm trying to think of what player, Johnny Furphy. We were discussing Johnny Furphy's defense for the Pacers and his ability to defend, especially late in the game. He was very effective late in the game for the Pacers against Chicago, right? And what area of his body did Tony East happen to point out that Johnny Furphy was very effective in utilizing defensively? I think he said actually that one of his defensive abilities is able to get into kind of the body of the opponent by using and utilizing his hips, right?
Sure.
Okay. I'm trying to get you to utilize your hip. Okay. And it's not easy. It's not an easy task. But the lingo that you can come up with, Eddie, when you're gonna be walking the streets and people are gonna say, that guy there, hip. And then other people that understand the show and know the show are gonna understand what they mean by the fact you're hip because they're gonna be down with the QR. QR. That's it. I'm not going to harbor on this today. I'm not going to. I'm not one that sticks with something and belabors the point. I'm just saying. Did you say that we're going to Atlanta? By the way,
Sure.
are we driving or flying to Atlanta?
I mean, do we have to go there since they're coming here?
I guess that's true. We are going to have discussion though with somebody who covers the Hawks. Hawks' next opponent for the Pacers, and is there a guy on the roster that maybe they'll give a quick tour of Gainbridge Fieldhouse because he could be somebody that the Pacers are targeting? We don't know that for a fact, but there is a lot of smoke about it. And we'll find out what the story is when Brad Rowland joins us from Locked On Hawks. Does it Other Side, Friday edition here, Query and Company, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Hey there, Jake Query for Game Day Men's Health in their clinics. They've got various clinics, a number of clinics around central Indiana in the metro area, including Avon, Carmel, Fishers, and Greenwood. The Carmel location is where I went in for Game Day Men's Health, and I love it because, yes, it's a clinic, but it's more than that. It's a very relaxed atmosphere, but one that is pinpointed towards a game plan for you guys that want to get back in the game. You want to get that extra energy. You're thinking about that low testosterone, and you're thinking, you know what, I've been sluggish. Maybe my testosterone is low. Guess what? They've got a way to find that out right there at Game Day Men's Health in just under an hour. You go in, it's quick, it's friendly, and they have FDA-approved pharmacies right there, whether it's the testosterone therapy that you're interested in, peptide therapies, which are an excellent way in terms of just, again, that energy, maybe getting rid of that belly fat, weight loss injections as well, and that recovery, helping out your joints, your ligaments, and recovery. All of it is available from Game Day Men's Health. A number of therapies there that you can explore. They're willing to sit down and talk to you about all of them. I absolutely love the precision with which they work. Game Day Men's Health. Find them online at GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Look for your consultation. Find out what it is that you might be interested in of all the therapies they provide. Again, that's GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Hey there, Jake Query for Chicago's Pizza. 18 Central Indiana locations, guys, right now, gals as well. You've got your opportunity to go in and enjoy the lunch buffet. Still an hour left because from 11 until 1:30 every day, the lunch buffet has traditional pizza. It has deep dish pizza. It has a salad bar with all the fixins and the salad dressings and, of course, the breadsticks that are hand-rolled fresh every single day. There's a story in every slice in Chicago's Pizza, and oftentimes those stories revolve around people celebrating as a family, coming in for Little League after games, whatever it might be at Chicago's Pizza, but also the story of the fact that each location is dedicated to the community that they serve. Chicago's Pizza, I absolutely love them. Great folks, better pizza. ChicagosPizza.com is the website. 18 Central Indiana locations. Don't forget, by the way, for this weekend, the $25 family meal deal. 2 medium, 1 topping pizzas and breadsticks for just $25. ChicagosPizza.com.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Going to go to Atlanta in just a second, but before we do that, Eddie, if you could, please, the breaking news sounder. This just in about 20 minutes ago. President Trump signed an executive order today to hold an IndyCar race on the streets of Washington, D.C. this summer as part of America's 250th birthday celebration. The race will be dubbed the America 250 Grand Prix. It would be August 23rd in Washington, D.C., utilizing both Pennsylvania Avenue as well as the National Mall. This has been something that has been mentioned and discussed. I can tell you that in terms of the travel or the calendar, for those of us that travel with the series, that had not been concretely mentioned, although it had been very lightly discussed as a possibility. There are a ton of logistics that need to go into that. I would anticipate that because Roger Penske as well as representatives from Fox were there for the executive order signing, that would mean those logistics are underway and taking place, but it is a huge venture. Baltimore was a fantastic place that we raced for 2 years back in the 2010s, and I loved it. And that area of the country, I think, certainly showed out in Baltimore. So we'll see what that means in Washington, D.C., and whether or not they are able to put that together for an August 23rd date in the nation's capital. Joining us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. More on that coming up, by the way, including one that will be returning to Pit Road during the IndyCar season when that happens. But Brad Rowland is with Locked On Hawks, covering the Atlanta Hawks, who are going to be here tomorrow night and joins us on the program. Brad, how are you?
Doing well. Appreciate you having me.
Let's get to, I appreciate you coming on. I want to get to this because before we discuss one of the key parts of Atlanta that I think is a really good player, it always takes two to tango, Brad, as you know, when you start talking about trade deadline and things like that. But where are the Hawks right now? We obviously know that they showed a lot of promise with Trae Young at one point, then clearly decided to go in a different direction from that. Is this a team that is in tweak mode or complete rebuild mode?
I would definitely say tweak mode. Part of that is that they haven't had their own draft pick because they've one of the trades they made during the Trae Young era, going to get DeJounte Murray in a deal that backfired on them pretty badly. But they're also very young. I mean, one of the party lines around here is that they always want to tell you that they are the third youngest team in the NBA. and they also really value their flexibility, and a buzzword here is optionality as well. Like, they have very clean books in the future. For example, they have this awesome draft pick coming from Milwaukee and New Orleans this year, et cetera. So they're not actively like tearing down at this point, but they're also not pushing their chips in. They're kind of like, we want to be competitive right now, but really the future is a bigger priority than the present for the Hawks.
One of those pieces, okay, is, Okongwu is a guy that was a lottery pick for them 5 years ago, which in NBA terms, sometimes that feels like forever, but he's a very good player. And I think he's become more even offensively. Initially, I thought he was a really good rebounder and a situational rebounder, but his game has developed now more well-rounded. And as Indiana is looking for their next Miles Turner, so to speak, and by that I mean a guy that fills that role, he is a name that has been linked. But is he a name that Atlanta would be willing to move from?
I think the Hawks would be willing to listen on Okongwu for sure. Like, he's not on the kind of top tier of relatively untouchable assets on this roster. At the same time, they have this model around him that kind of, I would say, informs any speculation about trading him. Like, he's on this really good contract. He's signed for 2 more years after this one at a very modest price, about $16.5 million a season for a starting level player. And I think that they know that allows them a lot of flexibility to kind of pair him with another starting caliber center and have 2. Like, most teams in the league, if you look around, either have a star center, like a top 5 to 10 center, or they kind of have 2. And the Hawks are kind of going in the route of maybe having 2. But I think that they basically, with the exception of Jalen Johnson and this draft pick and maybe Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they're kind of open to listen on anybody. So the answer is kind of in the middle, and that's not always the best radio, not always the best radio, but it's also just reality. Like, they would listen for sure. They're not eager to move him either, though.
The pieces that Atlanta would want, let's get to that. If they were to move on from, because I am really intrigued by him, by Okongwu, and let's just say hypothetically, Brad, that Indiana and Atlanta, or you're looking for what kind of a player. Tell me what that player looks like.
It's really interesting because of, in particular with Indiana, like, I think the Hawks, it's not that they have to trade Okongwu for a center, but if you're on the Hawks side and you're a team trying to compete in the playoffs even this season, if you trade Okongwu, you turn around, you don't have a center on your roster that you can rely on. And I think that's part of the challenge with an in-season trade in particular this year. In the summer, it might be more likely just because they have more flexibility. But I think in a vacuum, you're talking about cost-controlled young players, players, and or not like seconds, like first to some degree, probably some combination of those 2 things to get the Hawks to move again during the season, knowing that any deal with the Okongwu, I would imagine, would make them worse in the short term. And the Hawks aren't necessarily trying to make the finals this year, but they do want to make the playoffs. And I think that would be an active consideration to know that you're getting worse in any trade, if that makes sense. Do
you think Ben Mathurin would be of interest to Atlanta?
He could be. I don't know for sure. This front office is still a relatively new one for the Hawks. Like, they weren't the front office that evaluated that draft, so there's not like a data point to tell me whether they would be in on Mathurin. I think he's the kind of player that might be of interest to them. Like, they kind of need some more offensive punch generally, which he can provide. But also one of the questions, I know you are well versed in, like, he's not signed beyond the season, so it's like, what's his next deal going to look like? You have to actively really like him to want him as kind of a centerpiece of a move like this, because there isn't that cost certainty to, like, you have to negotiate with him. And maybe, I would say restricted free agency is pretty kind to the team a lot of the time, but you have to have that want. So talented player would make sense in Atlanta, given the timeline that he's on and the offense. I just don't know for sure if there is active interest on the Hawks side.
Yeah, you would have to assume, would you not, Brad? Brad Rowland is my guest from Locked On Hawks. He's on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. You'd have to assume that if the Pacers move on from Ben Mathurin, that it would be a sign and trade, right? Because anybody getting him or acquiring him, if it's a deadline move, you want to make sure you're getting somebody. He's not a rental piece, right? Because he's not coming with a big tag yet, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine certainly if you're trading for Ben Mathurin in the next few days, you have to be planning on signing him. That doesn't mean that you have to, give him the max if somebody else goes crazy this summer and you can't actively extend during the season anyway. But I think that if any team, whether it's the Hawks or somebody else, if you're proactively trading for Mathurin or any player in a situation, you have to be saying, all right, we're ready to pay this guy a market rate this summer, because otherwise I don't know why you would be doing it.
You know, I ask this question a lot, Brad, and I know that your job is to cover the Hawks, right? And you're focused on the Hawks, and so therefore,
People in the league who aren't. No one thinks it was like a total fluke, but it was like, hey, how real was that? Is a question that's out there on Indiana, which I think is understandable given what they weren't in the regular season at times, all that stuff. But I think the general consensus is like, hey, this is a really good team, and also teams around the league, kind of built not exactly like them, but there was a lot of like, hey, can we be the next Indiana? As far as like team building and, being strong and physical on the perimeter, having these multiple ball handlers, the way that the Pacers built their team. And yes, you have to have Halliburton to make it all go, but there was a admiration for what they did as well. So I'm not sure everyone's convinced that the Pacers are still going to be a title contender again next season, but everyone knows that like that's still a really good nucleus of a team, if that makes sense.
okay, now one of the things I like to do, Brad, before we let you go, sometimes I like to favorite. I don't know that anybody in Chicago, you mentioned the Indiana Pacers, thinks of Lance Stevenson, okay? So I'm going to guess here the 4 most popular and iconic Atlanta Hawks, like, to the fan base, okay?
All right.
Number 1, all time, I'm saying, okay?
Sure.
Number 1's got to be Dominique Wilkins, correct?
Yes, for sure.
I mean, like, probably not even, like, no one's even in the ballpark, correct?
Yeah, I think he still remains in a tier by himself as long as you're old enough to remember something about Dominique, he's still number 1 for sure.
Brad, how old a fella are you, by the way?
I'm about to be 40, so I remember the Dominique era.
I was going to say.
I'm not. People younger than me don't maybe, but I'm still in the area where I grew up watching Geeks, so I'm right there.
Okay, so I'm going to go with Tree Rollins.
Ooh, he definitely has kind of to your point earlier about Lance, like kind of a cult-like.
That's a good way of saying it. Cult following, right?
Like from that, especially from that era, because he wasn't necessarily ever like the guy on that team, but was, maybe it's the name too. The name Tree is kind of like memorable.
Correct.
People kind of latch onto it. So I don't know if he's in the top 4, but there is something to that for sure, where he's like definitely more beloved in Atlanta than he might be somewhere else.
Okay, here we go. Here's the rest of my 4. Dominique, I'll go with Steve Smith.
Yeah, he's up there for sure. That was go ahead.
Bob Pettit, but that's more St. Louis, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's it's funny. He's the best player in franchise history, but it's only St. Louis. So you have to like draw the line because he won the MVP and won the championship. That's the Hawks' only title was in St. Louis.
Here are my last 2. Trae Young, I'm still going to put up there, even though he was traded out, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Even though his star faded late, but I think with some hindsight in a couple of years, people will remember how below he was here.
Okay. Sure. My last one is my curveball here. John Drew.
Oh yeah, John Drew is sneaky beloved here, I would say.
That's like this show, Brad. We're sneaky beloved. That's the new motto for this program. Sneaky beloved is what we are, right?
Really good player for a long time and not a big name. So yeah, that fits in with what you're laying down there for sure. Okay, so then lastly, who am I missing? Anybody that I'm missing that you're like, Jake, you're a moron, Danny Manning or anybody I'm missing? More lately, I think Kyle Korver's like that in the more modern era of the Hawks. Like, people know Kyle Korver, but he was like really beloved during that like 10, 12 years ago run for the Hawks where it was Al Horford's team and Jeff Teague and those guys. But I think Korver, especially because he's still here, he works for the team. He's kind of the lots of memes about him and all. He's a name that I would throw out there for sure. He was also a journeyman, but like had his best years in Atlanta. Same, like, very endeared to the fan base.
All right, Pacers and Hawks, it will be tomorrow night at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Brad, appreciate the time, and should these two at some point hook up back in the playoffs, we will, or actually if there's a trade as well, love to have you back on.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Brad Rowland joining us from Locked on Hawks. Eddie, I want you to think about it. When we come back, I want you to tell me, other than Lance Stevenson, the other Pacer that perhaps is a beloved, sneaky beloved, not named Lance Stevenson.
We also do have some NFL news to get to as well.
Really? Some breaking news? It's a busy Friday. It's a busy, sneaky beloved Friday here on The Fan. Hey there, Jake Query for Surfside. Great new flavors coming out for 2026. But for right now, Surfside, you've heard me talking about it. So smooth and so good. Lemonade with a splash of vodka, iced tea with a splash of vodka, or you could always get the option of both with the splash of vodka. Surfside started out in Philadelphia and has been big here in Indiana because it is so smooth with no carbonation and so easy to enjoy no matter what the occasion may be. Look for the can with the sunset stripes. Surfside, wherever you buy your favorite adult beverages, but please be 21 and please enjoy responsibly.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Okay, so if you're just joining us on the program,
Where have you been?
Thank you, Eddie. Here's the skinny, if you will. And again, just using more hip terms, like the QR. QR. President Trump, in the last hour, signing an executive order to announce that on August 23rd, there is the plan for a free IndyCar event in the streets of Washington, D.C., the American 250 Grand Prix. This is part of the celebration of the 250th birthday of the United States. It would involve racing around using Pennsylvania Avenue and then racing around the mall. And I don't mean the mall like our Circle Center Mall. I mean the historic mall, the monuments of Washington, D.C. And I recall when we had a race in Baltimore, and I loved it. The race in Baltimore, to me, that might be, of the places that we have raced in terms of a street race, I just thought Baltimore was fantastic. The crowd was massive. They had one challenge the first year that we went there because they had a railroad track that was creating a bump where the cars would, and those are the little things that you don't realize. Just for example, a city street, no matter where you are, is designed, you don't realize it when you're driving on it, but there is a crowning on most city streets to allow water runoff so that streets don't flood. So if you're in the middle of Meridian Street, you are a slightly higher elevation than if you were on the side of the street. You don't notice, I mean, it's very subtle, But if you are racing a car at 190 miles an hour and, 9 inches off of the ground, you definitely notice it. And so the logistics of those things in terms of a race design and then all of the security that goes into it are things that are going to be, usually it takes a couple of years, I think, to put something like that together. Now, that's not to say that they maybe have not been planning on something like that for a while. I don't know. But the fencing, there are a lot of logistics that go into that. So it will be impressive if they're able to pull that off on August 23rd. Graham Rahal was one that said, look, this is an unbelievable opportunity because of the eyeballs that would come with it, regardless of whether people, and there are going to be people that consider that to be a politically affiliated event, and I understand that. But they didn't invite Formula One. They didn't invite NASCAR. They invited IndyCar. And I think IndyCar probably, as it's continuing to try to grow its fan base, is going to take advantage of any opportunity to be on a stage like that. And if it is a free event, then that's going to be massive, one would assume, in terms of the turnout. But we'll see between now and then. One of the things we know is that Tim Cindric, who was formerly the president of Penske Racing and was ousted from that position after the scandal that took place in the month of May, he will be back with Penske, and he will be back with Scott McLaughlin as the race strategist for the 3-car for IndyCar. And Cindric right now out of the country, but I think we're probably going to have him on the show next week.
Well,
now, Eddie, you said
not just the what happened in the month of May, Jake, but all the other things that have happened, prior to that as well.
The St. Pete, St. Pete as well with the push to pass. So, kind of like the Bill Belichick thing, linked to two different things. Before we get to the Pacers question as well, Eddie, you said there's NFL news, right?
Yes, the Minnesota Vikings have fired their general manager, Kwasi Adolfo-Mensah. A bit surprising in terms of the timing. He just met with the Minnesota media like 2 weeks ago for the annual end-of-season press conference, and the timing of this is very odd concerning you've got the draft combine coming up in a couple of weeks. The draft itself is, about 3 months away or so. And it's just very, very odd timing on why Minnesota would do this now versus, not on Black Monday or even a week after the end of the regular season.
You know who their assistant general manager is?
I do know that. Yeah. And
Did
Ryan
it say
Grigson.
whether or not Ryan Grigson was part of this change, or is Ryan Grigson?
No say on that. The announcement is just that they have fired their general manager. That's it.
I would think if you're Minnesota, the two quarterbacks that seemingly had the biggest bounce back year this year would be who, Eddie? If you're talking about veteran quarterbacks in the National Football League that have been journeymen but seem to find some solid footing this year and have had good years when they were healthy, it would be who?
For sure with Daniel Jones during that stint with the Colts. And
Okay.
I don't know if can you put Sam Darnold in that category since he had a good year last year?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. Because both of those players were in Minnesota. And Darnold was in Minnesota, and they opted to go with J.J. McCarthy instead of sticking with Darnold. And Darnold's in the Super Bowl, and Daniel Jones looks like he's going to, even with injury, get a big contract from Indianapolis. That and McCarthy struggled. And I know he's a young player, but you wonder if that didn't come into play with it as well. All right, we'll get your answer to the Pacers question, and we'll get back into one of the big questions about the Colts on the other side here. Query and Company, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Okay, Eddie. I think we can safely say if we were putting together a list, and I know this sounds like July radio fill type stuff, but before we get to Dustin Dopirak from the Indianapolis Star that's going to join us just a second here on kind of an anticipation of the trade deadline conversation. For you, if you had to list it, or if, between the two of us, the most popular Pacers of all time, it goes without saying Reggie Miller, okay?
Yep.
I think, obviously Tyrese Halliburton is now right there.
Yep.
I would then say probably Dale Davis and either Rick Smits or Antonio Davis. Now, Lance Stevenson would be the one, every franchise has it, that you would not anticipate is, a cornerstone guy that is a beloved figure. Now,
Yep.
who am I missing?
I think you're missing another guy that's currently on the team.
And by the way, and it goes without saying, the ABA Pacers, Roger Brown, George McGinnis, Bob Nedelicki, Freddie Lewis, all those guys, I'm going Mel Daniels. I'm not counting the ABA guys. They're all in their own stratosphere.
I think you're looking at TJ McConnell being on that
Okay,
list.
very fair.
Jeff Foster.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I don't know who else would fall. Danny Granger?
Not bad. I think Danny Granger's one that I think.
George Hill?
George Hill's a good one. As time has passed, I think Danny Granger is more appreciated now than when he was in the moment. I think people now can recognize that Danny Granger was a pretty darn good player. And, on not very good teams, but a good player nonetheless.
Mark Jackson?
Yeah, here's the thing about Mark Jackson. Jalen Rose.
Yeah.
I always kind of felt like, and maybe this is my own thought, I always felt like Mark Jackson was one that everyone knew he was a dynamic player and that he was a very important player and that he was, but at the same time, if you had to pick one guy that like no one ever fully embraced, it would be Mark Jackson. Maybe because he had been a Knick, but also because I think like the Reggie 30 for 30, I always got the impression that Mark Jackson, it was like, we're going to do a 30 for 30 documentary about Reggie Miller and we're going to interview Mark Jackson, and Mark Jackson's going to take the opportunity to tell us that he's the reason that Reggie Miller was great.
I think we should both be fired and not have to do the rest of the show because we didn't mention Jermaine O'Neal.
Yeah, he's an interesting one to me as well, though, because, and maybe I was a little too close to it because I covered the whole thing, and I like Jermaine O'Neal a great deal, and he's a wonderful player. But in the end, I think people forget about the fact that Jermaine O'Neal, it didn't end really well. It did not end well. It wasn't a Miles Turner level thing,
right?
But his availability, he was hurt a lot towards the end. And I think there were people that perceived it in the time as he was soft and a diva and whatever else. And now people look back and go, man, he was really good. So, yes, retroactively for sure, his stock has increased since he left. And he was really popular in the beginning for sure. When he, the thing about the Pacers franchise that is interesting, ever since Reggie Miller left, or retired, there have been this market and this fan base has so longed for having another Reggie Miller, which is why last year was so special and at the same time significant. Because initially, when Reggie Miller left, it was like, okay, this is Jermaine O'Neal's team. It's Jermaine O'Neal's franchise. Jermaine O'Neal's the guy. And then with Jermaine O'Neal, eventually when, like I said, the injuries and everything else, then it was Danny Granger's the guy. This is Danny Granger's franchise. Danny Granger's, and Artest is in that mix as well, but we know what happened there.
What about Tyler Hansborough?
He was more popular than the rest of the league would have guessed, right?
Yeah.
But after Granger, then this is Paul George. Holy cow, Paul George. Paul George is the guy, and he was a wonderful player. And I'll still remember, I remember vividly I was at the Paul George softball game when he sat there and said, like, this is where I want to be. And Kevin Pritchard was there in the crowd. And it was the next day or a week later or whatever when the word comes out that his agent has said, look, he wants out. So then they got Victor Oladipo. It was like, Victor Oladipo's the guy. This is Victor Oladipo's franchise. Here we go. This is great. Little bit of Sabonis there once they made that move as well. But now, and I think that's why last year was so special and so meaningful to people, because as they watched Halliburton in all of the plays and all of the moments and doing the choke sign in New York and, what he did and the pride in which he took on that, I'm from Indiana, I'm a Pacer. And he was open about the fact he thought he was going to be a king forever, a Sacramento king. And I think Halliburton was hurt a little bit by being dealt away from Sacramento because he wanted to be there. And how many players want to be in Sacramento, right? But he's a guy from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And when he came to Indiana, he had two choices, and one was to embrace it, and the other was to sulk about it, and he embraced it, and the city embraced him back, and so here he is. But I just think it was so significant for people because we had thirsted and longed for so long and falsely anointed so many players prematurely. And with Halliburton, it was the on floor where it's like, yep, there it is. That's the guy. That's the next face of the franchise. And, we'll see what happens in terms of where he is when he comes back from a playing and competitive standpoint. The other question becomes, are we going to see, for example, this weekend, a preview of a player that Indiana might be looking towards to replace Miles Turner and to run alongside Tyrese Halliburton and the rest next year? Joining us now, Java House Peel and Port guest line. We'll get the Pacers side of things. Our friend from the Indianapolis Star, it is Dustin
Dopirak,
who joins us on the program. Dustin, I don't know where this began, and you may say, well, Jake, it didn't begin anywhere. I don't know what you're talking about. But I really, and I have followed this guy for a while, but Okongwu for Atlanta is a very promising young player that was a lottery pick just 5 years ago and has really developed a well-rounded game at the center position. And I've seen his name linked as a potential trade object of desire for the Pacers. Is that just people trying to grab what player would fit in, or do you believe that there might be some smoke to this?
Yeah, I have a hard time knowing that one. I'm not really sure. I'm trying to remember who I saw it reported about. I feel like everything that I've seen is just that the Pacers kick the tires on this guy. And if you're the Pacers, you should kick the tires on everybody as far as potential centers. And he's definitely a guy that would fit them. Now, what would Atlanta want, and what would serve their purpose? I think is an interesting question, because it's like, all right, I don't know. I'm trying to remember what Okongwu makes. I got to look at his salary to make sure I know. But, does somebody like Walker or Mathurin do it for them? I think it's an interesting question. Certainly they're on that fringe, right now in that 9-10 spot. They need to get better. They have some pieces that are central. They're going to build around Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels and those guys. I don't think Okongwu was a bad player to have in the middle for them. And if I was them, I'd set a pretty high price for what I wanted. I don't know how much he makes as far as
16. He makes $16 million, by the way, Dustin.
16. So it'd have to be probably Mathurin and Walker. Because to match the salary, you'd probably have to be right about there.
Unless you did a sign and trade, right? If you sign, tell me how this works. If you signed Mathurin, let's say the Pacers just signed Mathurin to a 2-year, $40 million in a sign and trade and send him could they do it that way? And then the salaries are within the 10% or 20% or whatever it might be.
Yeah, they could do it, but they can't do it until they can't do that until June.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense.
You can't do they can't negotiate on a contract now and do it at the deadline. So they can't re-begin negotiations on that. So you can't do a sign and trade in February.
Would they consider adding Isaiah Jackson into a trade for the salary aspect to it and to kind of get rid of one of the centers on the roster? Because I know Rick Carlisle is like what they have seen from Micah Potter and Jay Huff this season as well.
Yeah, I mean the Pacers would. The question is, does that do it for Atlanta? I think that's sort of the more interesting piece there. I mean, I think they certainly, Mathurin and Jackson for Okongwu works for the works fantastically from the Pacers standpoint. Does it work from Atlanta standpoint? I mean, the money gets done. Like you get that across the finish line as far as being okay with the league. But like my question would be like, is that enough for Atlanta? I mean, like I would still. I think Okongwu was a nice player, and I don't know that he's one that I would rush to part with him if I'm Atlanta. So that's kind of more my thing. I think if you're the Pacers, yeah, he looks great. Does he solve all of your problems? Is he the guy? He's to me, he's good enough. He's good enough that you can trust him at the 5, considering what else is out there. It's going to be hard to get what you want, basically from the trade market as it is. I think you help yourself pretty much if you get Okongwu, but I'm looking at it from Atlanta's standpoint. I'm thinking, is that what they need? I'm not sure.
Dustin, this team, the Pacers themselves, let's go back to a couple of weeks ago to now. It looked and I became excited over the prospects and possibility of the Pacers becoming the San Antonio Spurs, a team that was not organically the worst team in the league, but found themselves falling into, and this has happened for San Antonio twice, the best player available in the draft and having the number 1 pick, and it changes you instantly. And I became enthralled by that prospect. But is Indiana now, in the combination of health and some guys starting to play a little bit, going to play themselves out of that possibility?
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, they're still right there, neck and neck with, for one thing, in both of those cases with San Antonio, you were talking about a definitive number 1 guy. Basically, whereas I'm trying to remember who was around for Duncan, and they were obviously good. You had Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson in that Wembanyama draft. But there was a big difference between one and everybody else. With this group, I feel like if you get any of the top 4, you're in good shape.
I would agree with that. And by the way, and Dustin, just so folks know, that's not because either one of us is disparaging. In other words, there are 4 instant impact type guys in this draft, right?
Right. That's my view. I feel like if you get Peterson, DeBonsa, Boozer, Wilson, you're in great shape. And I think, even the what's his name, Kingston Fleming from Houston might be that way too. But if you're the Pacers, you don't need a point guard. That's the one place where you're set. You already have your franchise guy. If you feel like they get any of those 4 guys, they're in good shape. To me, I think Peterson is the best fit. I think he's the guy that you would pick number 1 if you have the opportunity. But if, you're fine if you get DeVonta, you're fine if you get Boozer, you're fine if you get Wilson in any of those cases. So, if they find themselves in a position where that's where they end up, they're fine. The thing that you're worried about, I guess, is if you get really bad lottery luck and end up at 5, then everything's a little bit different. Then it's, do you want Nate Ament? Do you want, or Kingston Fleming, so it's okay, would you take the Steinbach kid from Washington and just roll the dice just because he's a big man? Then it gets a little tricky. But I think getting in the top 4, you're in good shape. And also, they're playing a little bit better, but I don't get where if I'm them in terms of are you winning too many games? I don't think you get worried until you get to 20. I think that's the number that you get to say, okay, are the rest of these teams going to get there or not? Because they might not. It does seem like everybody else is kind of committed to it. But nobody's pulling guys yet. But you still have the Pelicans with only 12 wins. I think the Wizards got their 12th win last night. You have 4 or 5 teams that are right around 12. I don't know if all of those teams get to 20. There's probably 1 or 2 of them that don't. And so, then 20 becomes a number where it becomes a little bit of an issue, but, they just blew a huge lead against Atlanta on Monday. Every time they play well, there's a tendency to look like maybe this is when they get going and maybe it becomes a problem. But they tend to lose games after that. And especially when they play better teams, certainly they were able to get that win against Oklahoma City. I don't think they're playing too good to worry about yet.
I'm going to give you, Dustin, I'm going to give you 5 names here, okay?
Yeah.
And of the 5, I want you to tell me which player we most definitively know what they are. Which one is the closest to the ceiling of solid understanding of who and what they are as a player, okay?
Yeah.
Jarris Walker, Ben Matherin, Jay Huff, Johnny Furphy, Ben Shepard.
Am I ranking them all in order? Or am I just
No,
ranking
just
number
the
one?
one of those guys that you say, okay, that one we are most able to now definitively draw a conclusion as to who and what they are. Jarris
Shepard.
Walker, Ben Matherin,
Yeah.
Jay Huff,
Yeah.
Johnny Furphy, Ben Shepard.
It's Ben Shepard by a long shot. I think I would rank them in order: Shepard, Huff, Furphy, Walker, or Matherin, Walker, I guess.
So
Walker, I think, still has the most room to grow. And this last couple weeks, you're like, all right, I do think like it certainly should change Rick Carlisle's view. And, I imagine it has to at least partially change the way that ownership is looking at it. Not ownership, but management is looking at it. But Ben Shepard is who he is. Ben Shepard is going to make open threes. He's going to annoy you on defense. He's going to move the basketball. I think Rick always says, like, exactly what you're getting from Ben Shepard every time. You're starting to really know what you're getting from Johnny Furphy every time. There's probably still a little more growth there. Huff has, he's limited in the ways that he's limited. He's good in the way that he's good. I think he is going to be who he's going to be. And Matherin is still Matherin. And there's certainly a good possibility he gets traded next week. And, you might find out more of who he is later. But I think you're just seeing that it's just, he's never going to perfectly fit in for what they want him to be.
do you believe that Matherin is a player that they could trade at the deadline? Not because they're going to parlay that in other words, conventional wisdom, Dustin Dopirak's my guest, Indianapolis Star. He's on the Java House Peel and Poor guest line. Conventional wisdom says, and I've been preaching this forever, you take Matherin and you trade him at the deadline for the Miles Turner replacement. And then in the draft, you draft the Benedict Matherin replacement. Okay?
Right.
Now,
Yes.
if the Miles Turner replacement is not there, is there the chance that they would move Matherin just to clear the space in the minutes for somebody that they're going to draft at the wing position, and then later they will figure out, and just with the cap space, what to do in terms of getting somebody to get Turner? In other words, could they move Matherin just to move him, or is it going to be only if they can get a valuable piece immediately?
I mean, they have to get something back. I think that's the purpose, is that you don't want to move that asset and get nothing back. So, I don't think they will, I don't think you'll see them trade him for another guy who's on an inspiring contract who they don't think is very good. I don't think it's going to be one of those situations where it's like, okay, just get this guy off my team. They are going to shoot for a center. They are going to try to parlay that into a five-man. But if for whatever reason one is just not on the market and they believe that, there's a better that they have another path. The other thing is I think you probably have to take you might have to take what's out there at the five in terms of what you can get for him, because it's just I don't know when something else shakes loose. I feel like you've just got to have somebody in there pretty soon that you can trust. But you absolutely can draft. I think they have to look at it and say, okay, well, you can draft his replacement because that's what it looks like that there is. If you end up with Boozer, that's a different story. But if you get Peterson or Devonta, then he absolutely is the replacement for those minutes, and he has the opportunity to play him. That guy will have an opportunity to play himself into more, has more chance to grow. You have more. His clock takes longer in terms of when you have to make a salary decision later on. But yeah, I think. Yeah, I think you want to, clear the money, clear the minutes, clear the opportunity. But I think you also do want to get something back for it. I think they would feel like they messed up if they had the number 6 pick in the draft and he was the 4th leading scorer in the class and you don't get much of anything out of him. I think they want to make sure they get an asset.
Do you think, by the way, who is the best player in the draft? I have my own thought, but who do you think it is?
I think Peterson, and maybe, I'll view that 2 different ways. Boozer is probably going to be the one that'll get all the awards, and he deserves it because Peterson's barely played. I think Boozer is certainly the most impactful college player. I think Peterson probably is the most presuming he's healthy, walks in and can do exactly what you need and can do. I think he just perfectly fits the Pacers. I think like he has been the quick shooting wing that they've been looking for. And so I think I think Peterson's the best overall talent. DeBonza might have the most upside. Boozer is the best college player, and he's the guy that I am most certain that he's going to be a good NBA player.
I think it's DeBonza.
Okay.
There's no right answer here, right? You know what I mean?
Any of the above can be, yeah.
And I've seen more of him. I don't know why, but BYU's been on when I've been channel surfing. You know what I mean? And Peterson, to your point, Peterson's had some. I don't know if it's necessarily totally injury issue or it's preservation issue, whatever it might be. But it seems like he has played the least. I haven't seen a lot of Boozer, if I'm being completely candid. But so anyway, having said all of that, we will end with this, Dustin. How confident are you that a notable trade will take place for the Pacers before the deadline?
Pretty confident. I put it in the 60% range. You never know when something's going to come around. It seems like a lot of people think Mathurin's getting moved. And I'm not saying that among Pacers guys. I mean, like national media, that kind of stuff. The
what
people
is
that kind of see this from an outside standpoint.
Is he coveted? I mean, is Mathurin a guy that you think people are intrigued by?
Intrigued, yes. Coveted, no. Coveted is a question of degree. I think there are people out there that look at it and see him as somebody that can help you, but I don't think anybody is looking at, like, obviously if he were good enough to be coveted, the Pacers would be trading him. I guess he's played well enough to intrigue people. I don't think he's played well enough for anybody to be like, man, that's the guy who changes me completely. Some of that's been injuries this year. He just hasn't been as explosive, or be that just the scorer that you've seen him capable of being. And I think it's just the last thing you saw kind of still sticks with you. There are certainly teams that look at him and say, okay, we could use that guy, but I don't think there's anybody who looks at him and says, okay, that guy's changing my franchise. And maybe he goes back to being that player. Maybe he goes someplace else and gets more of an opportunity and an offense that fits him better. And then, next year he's averaging 25 or whatever. But I think a lot of people thought, all right, with the opportunity and the minutes he was going to get this year, he was going to score 25 a game, just by virtue of, okay, the opportunity is going to be there. The shots are going to be there. You're going to be able to do what you want. And he hasn't put up the same kind of numbers. And some of that's the toe and some of that's the thumb and everything. But I think there would be more teams looking at him in that fashion if he came out and put up those kind of numbers this year.
Dustin, let's say they do make a trade at the deadline and it's not for a center. What would that trade be to address another need on the roster?
I mean, you can always use wing depth. You can always use more guys at the 2, 3, and 4. Like that's talents you can always have. It wouldn't be bad for them to have another 2-guard. Maybe a combo type guy, maybe somebody's 2-3, 3-4. And again, if you're going to move Mathurin, you have to have more depth there. You have to have somebody that can put the ball in the bucket. Doesn't have to score at the level that Mathurin has. But I think you'd like to have somebody in there that can get you points at the 2 or the 3, and that might be somebody that's perfectly fine to bring off the bench. But I think you could use a little. You're going to want somebody back with a little bit of punch if that's what if you're moving Mathurin, and you're trying to get something else and it's not a 5. Then I think that's what you'd want, even if it's on a limited basis. Even if you're thinking, okay, well, we're getting Peterson later. You just don't know how the lottery balls are going to go. You can't be sure that you're getting Darren Peterson. If you do, you can make some moves at that point. But I would think if you had to go somewhere else that isn't the 5, that's where you would, I think, most look.
Tomorrow night, Pacers-Hawks, Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Dustin will have all the coverage for the Indianapolis Star, of course, and happy to have him on the Java House P-Laporte guest line. Dustin, appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
That's our friend from the Indianapolis Star. That is Dustin
Dopirak
joining us on the program. All right, speaking of the Star, we're going to go from one to the other. There is actually a team, the last that I checked, and I could be wrong in this. There's a team in the area that I think is chasing history. And I'm going to potentially – I'm wearing my Rod Laver Adidas, which I really enjoy. Fabulous shoes, very comfortable.
Like the tennis court for the Australian Open?
Correct.
Did you watch Djokovic this morning take down Jannik Sinner?
I did not.
Oh, it was cinema.
I thought you were going to say it's sick. And I was going to say, Eddie, again, you got to go. Cinema, I like that. That was good. You're doing a good job of speaking a little bit more younger, hip, QR. QR. Kids love it. Listen, we had a meeting yesterday after the show.
Did you?
And they did a quick, they did a quick, that Walker research. But when you're dealing with younger kids, it's actually called runner research. And they did the runner research folk came in and they said the QR thing pops with the kids. So, but no, my Rod Laver Adidas, I wore boots the last couple of days, but now I'm like, okay, the stuff is clear enough. I can go back to to my tennis shoes, and the pair that I'm wearing, I like them enough that I'm not even worried if I had to put my foot in my mouth with what I'm about to ask that could be of historic nature in case I missed something that changed. But our next guest can tell me whether or not I'm on track with a historical feat that might be in the ranks or whether or not I missed something and that's not on the board. We'll explain all of it on the other side.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
We have not had a check yet today on the Snow Mountain wager. Now, if you recall, the week began with obviously in really a sizable amount of snow, just under a foot of it. And they plowed our parking lot here, and it created the always proverbial snow mountain peaks.
It's more of like a snow rink.
It really kind of is, right? So the question that I posed to Eddie to begin the week was, what will the date be when there is not a single trace left of snow or ice in the parking lot, and that all of the snow mountain range will have melted or been washed away. And I guessed, I believe I said February 16th?
17th.
17th, okay. So I guess February 17th, and Eddie chortled and then said, you're taking the under.
Chortled?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That might be a Karen Queryism. My mom has her own vocabulary sometimes, which is probably genetically where things like QR come from. QR. But I don't know if, can you look up if chortled is a word? Kind of means to snicker to oneself.
Chortle, laugh in a breathy, gleeful way. Chuckle. If you're using that as a verb, if you're using it as a noun, a breathy, gleeful laugh.
Okay. Well, you chortled. So are you revising your selection or are you sticking with it?
I'm sticking with it, Jake.
Your thought was that the
Sticking
sun
with
was
it.
going to melt it. Now, have you seen sizable change?
I have seen change for sure.
Okay.
I'm just contemplating whether this, I don't even know what direction that is, but the corner up here, closest to me.
Okay, that would be the southeast corner.
Okay, there you go. The southeast corner. I didn't know what direction we're facing, so that's the other part of it. So I knew it was southeast, but I didn't know if it was actually southeast.
Right.
Because for you, that's actually the northeast. For me, it's the southeast.
Well, no, it's the southeast. Directionally speaking, it never changes from southeast.
Oh, it changes.
No, you would say it is to my northwest because of the way that I'm sitting. But
No, that would not be your
geographically
northwest.
speaking, it is the southeast. To me, because I'm facing you directly, my upper left would be my northwest.
Well, when I said that, you were
area.
facing your computer screen, so it would
Okay,
be
well,
northeast.
so that's why I said you always go with where it sits geographically
But
speaking on the globe, which is the
nonetheless,
southeast
that
corner.
part, the southwest, northeast, whatever corner doesn't get a ton of sunlight there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only spot I'm worried about. But we're supposed to get some nice temps here.
Listen.
And
Just
next
so
week or
you
so.
know, I simply said the last spot. You should have taken that into.
I know. I know.
You know what I mean?
I know.
Do we have Kyle? Because you
Speaking
sounded
of lost and clueless, we bring on Kyle Neddenriff from the Indy Star.
you sounded a little lost and clueless when it came to
No.
discussing exactly that.
No.
He joins us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Java House, amazingly smooth Colombian coffee. They also have, of course, the Liquid Science hydration beverage or the Wrangler Energy, along with their teas. I had a peach tea last night. It was fantastic. All of it available. You can enter the fan at javahouse.com to see the Query bundle that has all the beverages. Jake, 25 for 25% off. Kyle, I am prepared to make a statement that makes me sound like a moron. You ready?
Yes.
Can you also tell it's Friday and we're kind
Okay,
of fed
here
up
is
with
my
one another?
statement. What's that?
I asked him if he could tell it was Friday and we're kind of fed up with one another.
That's right. Sorry, I actually had my mute button hit there. Okay, Kyle, here's my statement that's potentially going to make me sound like a moron. There is a local Indiana high school basketball team that has the potential to set and continue to break records on a win streak. But then I thought, I don't know if I should say that because they may have lost since I last saw and followed the story. Am I still within accuracy of that statement, or am I totally off base?
No, you're right. You're talking about Fishers, right?
Yes.
They have not played since that ran. They played tonight. They play Franklin Central and then Carmel tomorrow. The last team to beat them in the regular season is Carmel. So that was 2 years ago.
So this is 46 straight regular season wins, correct?
Yeah, and it kind of flies under the radar a little bit because you think about the overall winning streaks and not necessarily the regular season. So decided to do some digging and figure out where they stood, and they're basically on the brink of they are, I think, tied for 9th or 10th, but about to, could pass some more teams if they can get a couple more wins this weekend.
And the all-time record is how many games?
The all-time record
Regular
is
season.
76 by the Argos teams of the late 70s, early 80s. That was the 79 team went to the Final Four. And it actually went on until 81 when they finally had that 76 game streak snapped, which is pretty incredible to go on that long. Still a long way to go for Fishers to even get to that point.
It's kind of surprising that Lawrence North did not break that, right?
Well, the the problem, or call it a problem or whatever. The schedules for like the 4A teams around here are just so tough. I think that's why you haven't seen it happen. And honestly, what that kind of makes this streak Fisher's on even more remarkable, I would say, because there's bound to be a night here, got to be at some point where they're not playing their best, or you're missing you're missing somebody, like they have been missing Jason Gardner, and they've still gone on and done this. But yeah, the Lawrence North teams, they had they obviously did have a long streak, winning streak, and they hold the the record for the longest streak, actually, and Bloomington South almost beat that during the
Jordan Holes era, right?
Yeah, Jordan Holes, D. Davis, and those guys, and they got upset by Jeffersonville. Actually, I remember being at Hinkle that night and hearing they lost, and it was like, man, that's because I thought they were going to break the streak, but yeah, that was those teams came close, and obviously the Oscar Robertson Addicts teams had it for a long time at the 45 game streak. But yeah, 50 by Lawrence North is the overall mark.
By the way, on a side note, Kyle, I'll let you join in on this as well. One of my favorite little anecdotes. You mentioned an upset. Do you know the origin of the term upset?
I should. I don't think I do.
Do you know, Eddie?
I do not.
Upset was the only racehorse to defeat Man of War in the 19 teens. So the term, thank you. That's a brain drop. Yes, the term upset originated by the fact that people would reference it like, man, that was like when that horse Upset beat Man of War, and then boom, it became Upset. Anyway,
I thought you were leading me down a path of like some pirate joke or something, but that's
oh well.
Thank
you for mentioning it. Yes, that's correct.
Why, Kyle? Why?
Why did I do that?
Listen, here's the thing, Kyle. The pirate stuff's catchy, isn't it? Kind of like, I don't know if you heard this yesterday, but I've come up with, are you familiar with you're around, high school athletics and games, and I'm sure you hear kids using the 6-7 thing, right? And that's played out, isn't it? The 6-7 thing, that's over, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do it now because I know my kids think it's stupid. So, but yeah, other than that, it's definitely.
Yeah, I mean, most people want to 86-6-7. So, and what I said was the new thing is this, and you can use this with your kids if you want to, bond and feel cool with them. But if you're talking to your friends and somebody says, "What are you guys talking about?" You say, "We're just speaking in QR." And that means, because when you go to a restaurant and they say, "Here, if you'd like to see our menu, you can use your phone and use the QR code." So if you want people to know you're speaking in code, you just say you're speaking in QR. But then if you're extra hip, then you just say QR afterwards. And I created this yesterday, and you might have noticed that it's a little bit warmer outside, but there's also the wind of this sweeping through the area of people talking about getting hip with it. You want to use that?
I think I might, yeah.
Yes. Yes. See, Kyle Neddenriep knows. Listen, he's going out and he's covering high school basketball. He's covering players. He knows great when he sees it, right? He knows great when he sees it and when he hears it. Speaking of that, give me players that are off to, because, Kyle, we haven't had a chance to talk to you a lot during the basketball season. Name a player or two for me that are enjoying a season maybe beyond what was even expected of them to this point this year.
Well, I would say, I just kind of did a little thing the other day about Mr. Basketball candidates, and I think we, probably expected these players to do well, but Luke Ertl, Noah Smith, and Luke Ertl, I think, has gotten a lot of, I think people knew he was a Mr. Basketball candidate coming in from Mount Vernon, had a great year last year. Going to Purdue, and he's definitely lived up to the billing this year. But Noah Smith from Plainfield is really has played exceptional throughout this year. And Plainfield's one of those teams that, they're 16-1, ranked number 3 in the state right now. So, not that they're flying under the radar, but, people may not realize how good they really are. And they beat Lawrence North by 3 about a week and a half ago. Lawrence North was coming off that county championship, but Smith had 16 of his 28 in the second half that night, and really outstanding game and a season he's having so far. So, and then Dikembe Shaw from Crown Point, not in our local area here, but he's played a lot of teams from down here, went to the Hall of Fame, and had a really good tournament there, and I think he deserves to be in that category of candidates that you really highly consider. for that award as well. He's averaging a little over 20, about 22 a game so far this year, and really efficient as far as that goes as well, shooting almost 60% from the field, and a really good rebounder as well. So, those three guys, I think, and then there's some others you could consider as well. There's a kid named Blake Neal down in Bloomfield, a smaller school, but he's well over 26 points a game, over 2,000 for his career. I don't know if he'll get Mr. Basketball votes or not, but I think definitely deserving of an Indiana All-Star, high consideration, and he's also having a great year. But those are a few kind of top of my mind that have really been standing out so far this season.
Kyle Nedrep is my guest. Java House Peel and Pour guest line is where you're hearing his voice. He's with the Indianapolis Star. Kyle, I know you've got a story coming out Monday that you've been working on that is one of those that we like. Stories of kids that just have their adversity, they're back against the wall, and they find a way. And, I'll let people wait until Monday to read what you have coming out for that. But you have the unique perspective and ability to go out and you're at different games and you're covering sports, whether it be basketball or, during the football season. And I like to ask you this every once in a while, whether it's a team that is overcoming some challenges or an individual player that's having a good year, and you look at it and you say, if people knew the backstory of everything that went into this, they would be truly moved by it. I don't mean the one you're talking about that you're going to be running on Monday. What jumps out, if anything, to you, either from a team or player standpoint in that regard?
Well, the one you're talking about is a great one, a great example of that exactly. And I'll, kind of wait. It's a really cool story, and I think people will be interested to read about it and hear more about it. But there are some teams that have maybe played better than expected, or maybe have been off the radar. And I think and one that I hope to get into a little bit more is Shortridge, which is 8-6 so far this year, and they have a really outstanding couple players that are having good seasons, and their team. And I don't know if people remember so a few weeks ago, Fishers had just lost Gardner to that hand injury, and unfortunately, and the next day Shortridge played Fishers to a 2-point game. It was 64-62 at Shortridge on, I think it was in late December, right before Christmas. And, I think that kind of opened up some people's eyes to, how good that team can be. And people were what happened to Fishers? It turned out, Shortridge's a pretty good team. And, they played a tough schedule. They have good wins. They beat Ritter. They beat Greenfield Central. They played Pike really close, in 3 quarters of that game, and then Pike kind of blew it open and won by 15, which is not bad at all considering how talented Pike is this season. But I think they're a team. And unfortunately they're not in the city tournament. They're because of some of their other sports, they're not part of the city alliance. So they're not in this. I would have loved to see how they would have done in the city this year, and the city was a better showing, I would say, this year. Ritter and Cecina both gave Cathedral a pretty tough game, but I would like to see how they could play there. And I think really in the tournament they're going to have a chance to do some damage. But so those two players, I'll have to write about them a little bit more. But Elijah Wilson is averaging over 25 a game, and T.J. Davis had a huge week last week. Also, he's a junior only, so he'll be back next year. But he's over 16 points a game and pretty high in rebounds, also about 7.5. So those two guys deserving of mention, I think, in that Shortridge team for sure. They're 8-6, but a better team, I think, than their record shows. And I think in that 3A sectional, they're going to be a handful, but also have Cathedral and Attucks in there too. So it's a tough sectional, but maybe a team that could be a sleeper pick about a month from now when the sectional starts.
I just think, Shortridge is always a cool story in its own right just because of the history of the school. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, Kyle, the history of kind of reclaiming that school, if you will. You know what I mean? It's been a middle school, then back to a high school, and some of the things that it has to offer. Historically speaking, Shortridge has as rich a history as any in Indianapolis. And so to see it back where kids can kind of push their chest out a little bit about going to school there is pretty cool to see.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's, Unfortunately, in the city, I know you know this, but even when I was first covering it, you had all these schools that, the Arlingtons, the Howe, there was just all this, Northwest, Broad Ripple, these schools that had so much history, especially in basketball, and you lost that when those schools closed and have gone away. Manual, is another one. And I kind of got in on the tail end of that, but they were all still really good when I was covering it when I first got here. And, you go to the city now and all the schools are not there anymore and you lose out on that, and I think in basketball more than any sport, definitely. But yeah, so it's good to see Shortridge and I'm hoping they end up having a good year. And I think they, under, the last couple of years, Ryan Mulcrone's been the coach there and they seem to have it headed in the right direction. So be curious to how they close this year out and continue on.
So, Kyle, what games will you be keeping an eye on this weekend before we read your story coming up on Monday?
Yeah, so it'll be it's a Saturday, kind of a heavy Saturday week. That I mentioned that Fisher's Carmel game is Saturday night. That'll be a really good one. Carmel's having a really good year, obviously, and Fisher's is too. I'm going to head out to Sheridan tonight to see the Blackhawks play. They're 10-2 so far this year, and then we'll have coverage of other games also in addition to those. But yeah, it should be another good weekend of basketball. And looks like the weather's going to hold up, and it's going to be cold, but the games go on, so that's a good thing.
This might be. You mentioned Sheridan, Kyle. This might be one of those things that I saw in a dream. I maybe I'm totally off base here, but I thought I saw recently that Bud Wright is back coaching again. Am I correct in that?
You're correct. I spoke to the man himself Wednesday night, I believe it was. So yeah, he's coaching at Southwood. And I asked Bud, "How are you good making that drive?" He said, "Oh, it's only 66 minutes from my house, and I was going 62 minutes to North Miami last year as an assistant." So and he said, "If I have to camp," he's like, "I've got a camper. If I need to stop at the the Mississinawa Reservoir there, I'm good to do that as well if I get tired." So he's good to go. He's 85 years old and starting a new job at Southwood next season.
Unbelievable. That's impressive.
Yeah.
That is impressive. All right, Kyle, appreciate it. Now, I'm going to let you do a quick, just rehearse it real quick so that your kids will be impressed. If they're talking, you just simply say, "You guys must be talking in QR," and then you go, "QR." And it'll take off like a house of fire. Do you want to practice one just real quick? Make sure.
I should probably do that off air. I'll have it.
Come on! I want to make
next
sure
time
you get as the QR. I've got not yet the trademark on it, but I want to make sure that you're up. That you're using the cadence the right way.
Well, do it again so I can get it down.
Kids. The thing is, I was just talking to your mom, and we were talking in QR. QR. That's it. That's all you do.
Did we lose Kyle? Wow, what a time. I'm just kidding. I turned him off just to mess with you there, Jake. Kyle's still there.
Go ahead, Kyle.
In QR. Am I getting that right?
Well, yeah, a little more dramatic on the QR.
You got to slow down the second one.
The buildup of Eddie muting your mic took care of it. All right, Kyle, appreciate it, man. Enjoy the weekend, all right?
All right, guys. Thank you.
It's Kyle Neddenriep joining us on the program. Eddie, you're not on board with the QR train.
Well, I think Kyle knows the clock better than the host, and I think he realized it was time to get to a break, so that's why he didn't want to do it.
There are some big bulletin headlines to get to. We'll let you know about them next.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Now, Eddie, just so you know, you ever get a we don't get as many of them since John Griffin doesn't work here anymore, but you ever get those voice notes people send instead of texting you, they just send you a voice note?
Yes.
I just received one from Brent, listener of the
Halverson?
program. No. Brent Cox, listener of the show, friend of the show.
Okay.
Hang on. Let's
Do you
see.
need me to turn on the Bluetooth feature for our console in here?
Hold on. No. Here we go.
You want me to turn the Bluetooth on for the console in here? You can connect for some better audio, Jake?
No, that's dangerous. I think you could hear it right there, couldn't you?
I don't think so.
I'll do it one more time.
Okay. Something happened to your mic, Jake. I think you turned it off on accident. I can't hear it. What?
Okay, I'm telling you.
What's going on?
You can't hear it because of the sound of that
you talking about?
sweeping the city. A couple of news and notes. Kevin Bowen going to join us just a couple of minutes from now. Earlier today, the president, Donald Trump, issuing an executive order, more kind of theatrical than anything, I guess, in announcing that August 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, so the weekend of August 23rd, it will be the IndyCar America 250 Grand Prix. This is all in celebration of the 250th year of the United States. The race will take place in Washington, D.C., utilizing Pennsylvania Avenue as well as the mall and the monuments of D.C. Now, that means obviously a very short time frame of which to logistically put that together, although I would assume the design and other such things of the track have already been studied. But there's a lot that goes into that. The building of temporary walls for the circuit itself, fencing, security, etc. Early word is, and obviously we've been on the air, so I haven't read the total specifics of it, but the early word is that it would be a free event in Washington, D.C. And Roger Penske and I believe executives from the Fox Corporation were there for the announcement. And I will tell you, as someone who works as a contracted employee of IndyCar, while there had been that discussion or that word that this was a possibility, we were never told that this was, in fact, a finality. But it appears as though that all systems are go towards trying to get this event underway. The other thing that is allegedly linked to it is that would mean that Milwaukee becomes a single race instead of a doubleheader. So we'll see what that means for the Milwaukee event. Also, Minnesota, the Vikings are in search of a new general manager. They made that announcement earlier today. Keep in mind their assistant GM is Ryan Grigson. We'll see what that means in terms of his placement within the Vikings. Yes, Eddie.
One other thing to add, earlier today, Alexa Philippou with ESPN, she covers all things women's basketball, WNBA, college. She tweeted at about 11:30 this morning that Kelsey Plum says that there will be a player meeting with the league on Monday in New York City to try to hash things out, to make some progress on a collective bargaining agreement between the WNBA and the Players Association. She said, Kelsey Plum did, that not everyone can make it, but she did mention that Nafisa Collier will also attend, and she is hoping that some owners will be there as well. The hope is here from Kelsey Plum is that being able to communicate face-to-face with management will help conversations move forward, because we are just about 2.5 months, 3 months away from the start of the WNBA season, Jake, and it would be a real shame if they can't come to an agreement on a CBA with all the progress they've made the last 2 years.
Totally agree with that. In the arc, if you will, of popularity or eyeballs to the sport. And a lot of that, of course, epicentered right here in Indianapolis with Caitlin Clark. Kevin Bowen, Morning Show. Fan Morning Show. You hear him with James Boyd, Jeff Rickard. And as we get set for the Super Bowl and also look towards some phone calls being made to West 56, a lot to discuss with Kevin. We'll do it next. Hey there, Jake Query. You know, no matter what your weekend plans, whether you are going to just sit in and watch movies, whether you're watching sports, whatever it may be, Surfside, always a good idea. Surfside, of course, look for the can with the sunset stripes. It's kind of like summertime in a can because it's lemonade with a splash of vodka or iced tea with a splash of vodka, but perfect no matter what the event may be because it is so smooth. No carbonation, so it is so easy to drink, and just 100 calories, 2 grams of sugar. Lot to love about Surfside, including some of their new flavors that are coming out in 2026. Surfside, look for it wherever you buy your favorite adult beverages, but please be 21 and please drink responsibly. Hey, guys, you're thinking about getting back in the game, right? You're saying to yourself, you know what? I got to get back in shape. Or I just want more energy. Maybe your testosterone is something you're curious if it's too low and you want more energy. Maybe you simply want faster recovery. Game Day Men's Health is here for you. Game Day Men's Health has clinics in the Indy metro area, including Avon, Carmel, Fishers, and Greenwood. And, of course, the goal at Game Day Men's Health is to ensure that every patient receives the highest quality testosterone services or peptide therapy services with FDA-approved pharmacies right here in the United States. And I went through their clinic in Carmel, and it is fabulous because it's a laid-back atmosphere, but they are precise in making sure that they're coming up with a game plan for you to everything to your comfort level and where you want to be with your goals. Get back in the game. Start feeling that energy again. Start feeling fewer of those aches and pains. Game Day Men's Health helps out with all of that. Game Day Men's Health. Find out more about all of their therapies and a consultation at GameDayMen'sHealth.com. That's GameDayMen'sHealth.com.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
True story. I had a friend that went to the University of Michigan, and Chris Webber's phone number was in the student directory, and so during the time that they were curious if Webber would be foregoing his final 2 years of eligibility at Michigan. Friend called him. They called him on the phone one night and played that song when Chris Webber answered the phone, to which Chris Webber said, and I quote, or at least if I remember the quote correctly 30 plus years later, "What do you think I'd do?" And they're like, yeah, okay. And a couple days later, it was announced Chris Webber was on his way to becoming the number one pick in the NBA draft. Good afternoon to you on a Friday. Jake Query along with Eddie Garrison. It is Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan, where over the course of today, I have been working feverishly, and Eddie has reluctantly been accepting my tutelage of making him a little more hip, a little more young with the lingo.
Nope.
Well,
Not at all.
listen, how disappointed are you going to be
I'm
if
not
you get
disappointed.
home and your girlfriend Olivia is talking about something, and you say, "What's that?" And she says, "Am I speaking to QR?" QR.
That would require her to listen to the show, Jake.
Okay. And you're saying you don't believe that she does?
No, because she is currently at her job teaching. So
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Oh, teaching.
Yeah.
What group? What age?
Freshman at Greenwood.
Oh, I bet a lot of kids in the back are speaking in QR.
No.
Okay.
No.
You just wait till she comes home and says, "I heard the weirdest thing at school today."
No.
Okay.
Not happening.
Joining us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line, you hear him in the mornings along with James Boyd, Jeff Rickard. He is Kevin Bowen. Kevin, I'll begin with this. The NFL news of the day, I don't know if you saw it or not, Minnesota, kind of a peculiar time because usually changes come right at the end of the year or, into the season when a team's season ends. But the Vikings are moving on from the general manager spot. That means they have an opening. Ryan Grigson was the assistant GM. I don't know what that means for him. But do you think this may have something to do with the Vikings having to look and see Sam Darnold in the Super Bowl and Daniel Jones having played well for Indianapolis and J.J. McCarthy struggling?
Love the Chris Webber story. I will pray for Eddie as I do pretty much on a daily basis. Yeah, that was, and honestly, you bring up Grigson. I remember Grigson was fired pretty deep into January as well. It was definitely like a 3-ish weeks after the season ended. He is still the assistant GM there. I believe, if I read their press release correct, though, they have somebody else that's running the show through the draft, some like VP of football ops. So I don't know exactly what it means for Grigson per se, but yeah, obviously when you bring up the Daniel Jones point, I think that's an interesting one because I believe, I could be wrong on this, I believe Minnesota actually offered more money than Indy did for Daniel Jones this past year. And I think Daniel Jones very understandably looked at it and said, whatever, $15 million versus $12 million, whatever the numbers were. I have no idea what they were. Where's the shorter leash? And obviously Anthony Richardson's leash was quite short and J.J. McCarthy's much longer. So I think he made, obviously, the right decision on that. But I wonder, to your point, if that's some of the disagreement, if Kevin O'Connell and that coaching staff might have been more inclined to, whatever, either want to bring back Darnold or want to bring back Jones. And, how much of J.J. McCarthy with a high draft pick was part of the decision here.
Can we learn, Kevin, and I talked about this a little bit over the course of the week, certainly at the beginning of the week. If you look at Seattle, and it's a copycat league to a great extent, but with Seattle and what they've done in going out and getting Darnold, and Darnold, to his credit, has played at a high level, and he did a year ago. Now he has some untimely turnovers, and he's avoided that to an extent. But is there any blueprint that Seattle has shown that the Colts can kind of replicate, or maybe even were on the path to replicating if Daniel Jones doesn't get hurt? Do they have as good a cast around Jones as Seattle has built for Darnold?
Yeah, I'd say no on that aspect, particularly defensively.
Right.
Jackson Smith-Njigba, is definitely in a different wideout level. But yeah, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, I think one thing that stands out to me about Seattle, Jake, is like, I go back to, I guess I go back to Carly Ursay-Gordon's question for Chris Ballard. The top question for her GM was, do you still have the juju or the shimmy? Was that the right word? I think you said, or shimmer, right? Do you have the shimmer still? And Seattle, I guess, asked that of Pete Carroll a couple of years ago, and whether Pete Carroll's answer was what they wanted to hear or not, they decided that despite this guy having a great NFL run for us, I mean, he really had a very, very strong 10-year run there. And if I'm not mistaken, I want to say they had winning seasons each of his final 2 years there. They still decided, hey, we're gonna make a change. So I think that is something that's a little different here, from an organizational standpoint, if you want to look at it from the top down. And honestly, New England, if you want to look at them too, they had a beloved player in Jerod Mayo take over for Belichick, and after 1 year, they said enough was enough, which is a kind of Nate Bjorkgren-y approach like the Pacers. Hey, enough is enough. And, not every, hire after 1 year turns into Rick Carlisle, Mike Vrabel, but, obviously it worked out very, very well for both of those franchises in how you look at it, whereas the Colts have been a little bit more of a, no, we're going to hold on to things. We believe, all of that stuff.
Do you think there's the possibility, Kevin, that the Colts could try to get themselves back into round one?
That's a good question. I haven't given it a ton of thought. I would probably say no. I don't. I mean, where are they? They're in the middle of round 2, right? Or a little bit. Yeah. I don't know where exactly the pick is, but whatever. They're in the middle of round 2. Boy, that's quite a leap. I don't. I mean, maybe if you moved a player, you could get maybe an additional second rounder. It'd have to be a very marquee player, and then maybe you try to package something together and get into the back end of round 1. But I mean, I would think just as an organization, you would only do that for quarterback. I don't think they view their quarterback need that dire. I don't know if their quarterback situation paired with this draft class meets that criteria. The team I think about the most that did that was Baltimore with Lamar Jackson in that 2018 draft. And, he was a pretty polarizing prospect, with a lot of debate and a very quarterback-heavy draft class. I mean, he was the 5th quarterback taken in the Sam Darnold draft, in the Baker Mayfield draft, in the Josh Allen, Josh Rosen draft there. So I don't think so, to answer it. I just that's a lot. And to do it, you'd probably do it for a quarterback. I don't. Maybe there's an edge rusher, but no, I don't think so.
Do you think, by the way, Kevin, when you talk about the quarterback, I think we just have this foregone conclusion or understanding that Daniel Jones is going to re-sign and come back. And I know coming off the injury, that would seemingly lock him in because I don't know how many people will be knocking down his door. But if we ruled out what if in Arizona, okay, or let's say that the Raiders look at it and say, you know what, we love a different player, number 1 overall, and we just don't know that Mendoza is a franchise quarterback. So we're going to draft, whatever player at number 1, and let's just take a flyer that Daniel Jones is going to be healthy and throw a big number at him. Are we certain that Indianapolis is going to obviously, I think he wants to be here. But do you think there's the possibility that some other team does make a call on him?
Honestly, when I saw the Minnesota news today, they were the team that kind of popped into my mind just because Jones spent a couple months there. He speaks very glowingly of Kevin O'Connell. And again, I believe Minnesota offered more than Indy last year in free agency. So, if you were in the Jones camp, do you look at things and, whatever, let's just play this out, the hypothetical. If Minnesota were to offer, X amount of million more this offseason, would he view it a little bit differently than he viewed it last offseason? Whereas now he's like, oh, wait a minute, I could go there and be the starter. Now, let's not diminish what the Colts did for him. I don't want to lose sight of that. I think Daniel Jones, very understandably, is a big believer in Shane Steichen and, really appreciates, obviously, what played out here. I think from a lifestyle standpoint, the pace of, living in, the middle of Indianapolis is a little different than living in New York City. Not to say Minneapolis would be more of that speed, but, that, again, is a team that I have thought about because it is odd, Jake. I mean, you've been in this business a long, long time. You typically don't see two sides of a leveraged situation both be so public in wanting the marriage to continue.
Right.
Usually someone draws a little bit of at least a public line in the sand, behind closed doors. They might not, be as willing, but, at least publicly they act like they're going to play hardball where deep down they really know where they're going to want to be when it's all said and done here. So I still assume he'll be back here. And I would assume also there's teams that would be hesitant about the Achilles.
I mean, that would be the big thing. It almost felt like if there was the possibility that there would have to be a bidding war for Daniel Jones in the offseason, that the Achilles took that out of the equation. You can never rule out. I guess the question I would have, Kevin, is do you think the Colts, would it be wise of the Colts to have a backup plan ready to go in the event that they are shocked and somebody comes in and swoops that away?
Well, yes, but I also think, and this gets into a whole different sort of discussion, if you really, whatever, you've met with Jones' representatives at the Combine here in a few weeks, and all of a sudden you get the impression that you're way off on what you think is a ballpark market, you do have the franchise tag, which, can be used. Now, the franchise tag is a $46 million guarantee.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a whole different can of worms. And again, in the back of my mind, I tend to think it makes more sense to use that on Alec Pierce. So, if all hell breaks loose and you're really in panic mode, you could go with that method if you would like.
Kevin Bowen, my guest. You hear him in the morning, of course, on the Fan Morning Show with James Boyd and Jeff Rickard. Kevin, one of the things also I know you guys have discussed, it seems as though when you're talking about free agency, I think we anticipate that Alec Pierce is going to be coveted around the league, but it also seems like this foregone conclusion that he will stay here. Am I being too bullish on that thought, and what do you think his number is going to be?
Yeah, and that's where I think the franchise tag makes sense, because I think if you let him to the open market and you try to be competitive there, I think you're going to see some very big offers for him. He's still in his prime. He's not had injury history. Again, the thing about Pierce, and I can hear people say, hey, he doesn't catch enough balls for my liking. Okay, fine. But he possesses the hardest trait to find, in my opinion, in the NFL for a receiver, and that is the ability to consistently make plays down the field. That's really where the NFL's trend has gone defensively is, we're going to do anything and everything we can to eliminate the ability for teams to just, turn drives into 4 plays and 72 yards, and you hit a 30-yarder and a 20-yarder, and boom, now you're cooking. The methodical driving down the field is a little bit more difficult for an offense to sustain. And so that's why when you look at Pittman versus Pierce, for example, again, what's the harder trait to replace? If it gets into that decision, to me, that's obvious. The hardest one to replace it would be Pierce's home run ability. So, I've kind of been under the impression, Jake, that they would just franchise tag Pierce, give Jones what Baker Mayfield got a few years ago, what Sam Darnold got a few years ago, something along those lines is kind of how I look at it. But, if all of a sudden they do want him to hit the open market, again, I think he would be very, very coveted. So that's a really interesting one.
One of the things about Pierce in his game, Kevin, to me that's underrated, and it feels like he draws, in my mind, I know that I'm embellishing the number, but it feels like that he draws at least 2 critical pass interference penalties per game that extend drives or move drives for Indianapolis. And is that I would assume that's just his ability to get behind a defense and then they're playing catch up, right?
I mean, I would argue it's maybe the Colts' best weapon. And I say that half jokingly, half seriously, but it's almost like, bleep it. Alec Pierce is down there somewhere. Might as well throw it down to him. I always tweet out during games whenever the Colts do throw the ball to Pierce. I'm like, good things happen when you target him. And when I say that, obviously he comes down with a lot of those balls. But also, in the backyard, he's the biggest and oldest dude, and he's the big brother that the little brothers are all clawing at in the game of 500, and they naturally bring him to the ground, and boom, that's a flag. Like, DBs panic. I think we see – there's so many games you could point to this year where that happens. I recall, was it the Houston game where Jones threw a ball that almost hit the cheerleaders, and yet the Houston DB was so – I think it was a safety that had gotten isolated on Pierce. He was so worried about it, he kind of brought Pierce to the ground, and they deemed it still catchable, I guess, and Pierce was able to draw a flag there. Like, yeah, if you added up his pass interference or holding penalties, I would argue he'd have another couple hundred yards to his season.
Kevin, how was the trip up to Notre Dame? And I saw, I think it was Jordan Cornette made comment to the fact that he was disappointed by the crowd at Notre Dame. I know you guys went up there for that game, double overtime game, right, with Virginia?
Yes, correct. Yes, I would agree with that. From Jordan Cornette, crowd was pathetic.
What? Now, I can't recall what night it was. So was it before or after the snowstorm and et cetera?
Well, it was Tuesday, night. So, I mean, it was the 7 o'clock game before IU at 9. Now, they didn't get as much snow as we did. Like when Rakestraw and I were driving up there, and by the way, when I say we, I mean Rakestraw was driving and I was just, had the nice shotgun experience. 31 was a breeze. I mean, it was like they still have the lake effect from that apocalyptic snow they got a few weeks ago, but it really, 31 wasn't bad at all. So great time, great game, brutal ending. It was a question your fandom type of loss. It was a big look in the mirror moment for me, but I'm back on it tomorrow.
Okay.
At Syracuse.
When they hired Micah Shrewsbury, you got shirtless and you brought in donuts out of your joy. It was hard to eat the donut with you sitting there shirtless, admittedly. But are you beginning to question that? Not being shirtless, or simply Micah Shrewsbury's a good guy. I mean, don't get me wrong, but is he the right guy for that job?
Yeah, totally fair question. Notre Dame is trying to do a little bit of what Purdue is doing, and they're trying to recruit the high school kids more than live in the portal. They just don't, and I know it sounds weird to say, but they don't have the NIL slush fund that a lot of these programs do for basketball, to be very clear on that. He also has losses, but Marcus Burton is likely out for the year. He got hurt, 6 games into the season, 8 games into the season. So, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of an excuse, but, there is some validity to it. I would still like to see kind of one more year with him. If you can bring back Jalen Harrelson, Burton get healthy, they don't really lose much, really at all, of their group. And, I mean, at the end of the day, it is Notre Dame basketball. I mean, I love it like it's one of my children, but, I mean, it's me and 7 other people in the world that treat it like that. So I would like to see just another run with it, but, the resume is the resume right now. I mean, they haven't beaten a ranked team, I think the stat is, in his tenure, which is just astonishing. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm probably the wrong guy to ask, but I'm trying to give you an unbiased answer with a very biased brain.
Kevin, the last 11 games, Pacers are 6-5. I saw you were out at practice today for the Blue and Gold. When are you making this recent 2-week stretch for the Pacers from a team perspective, and then, individually with Jarris Walker, Johnny Furphy flourishing as of late for Indiana?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first you start with just general health. I mean, it's the healthiest they've been all year long, especially now that Matherin's back. Obi Toppin was doing some shooting drills, so I don't know if his return seems to potentially be happening soon. Obviously, you get into the awkwardness of, what you might do as the season moves along. But, as far as Furphy and Walker, yeah, I mean, that's, to a lot of people, Eddie, that might mean more than the wins and losses. Like if Furphy and or Walker become a thing, then that's really key for whatever the next era looks like for, Tyrese Halliburton. Rick Carlisle specifically today was pretty, very complimentary of like Furphy's ability to defend without fouling, and that aspect to has kind of been a missing ingredient for the team and everything. So definitely have played better. And now we await Thursday, I guess. Are we watching the final few games of Benedict Mathurin in a Pacers uniform? How exactly will the deadline play out? That's kind of the big storyline now.
Speaking of that, where do things stand with your Benedict Mathurin statue that you were going to build?
Well, it's currently under some snow. So I'd have to start there. I'd probably have to, I know you guys have a bet on the snowbank in the parking lot. I'd probably have to start.
Do you want to get in on the bet on the snowbank in the parking lot, Kevin?
Well, Eddie told me, Eddie and I discussed it the other day. First off, I think it's a great bet by both of you. I think it's very entertaining. I probably side a little bit more with you. I always find it, which it pains me to say, but I always find it like amazing when you drive by those big, mall parking lots in March, and you're like, holy bleep, that snowbank is still there. Now, having said that, the sun has been out like every day this week. So weirdly, I feel like it's melted a little bit more than I thought it would.
However, keep in mind, I did say, and Eddie, back me up here, I did say when initially making the wager with Eddie that if we get more snow that is added onto it, you have to factor that in, right? Yeah, and I don't know that we have any forecast in the next couple of days, but it's hard to think that we will not have another snow before it's all gone, right?
There's a chance of flurries next week.
Okay.
Oh boy, this is going to get real complicated real quick. So yeah, all in all, I probably sided with you on it, but you better believe I'm going to be monitoring that thing like none other. I'm all in on this.
See, now you could also get all in on this.
So you're siding with him, but rooting for me, just to get this on the record, right?
Yeah, that probably sums it up correctly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, how about this? Just so you know, Eddie, and Kevin, since you're a father, you're always trying to be hip with the kids, right, Kevin?
Yeah, 6,
Okay.
7, yeah, whole thing.
So you know the new one. 6'7's, Kevin, I don't mean to be rude here. That's kind of played, right? The 6'7" thing. It's been 86th. So the new thing is this, okay?
I thought it was 41 was the new one.
No, the new one's QR. You're speaking to somebody, and like the kids come in and you and your wife are talking, and they say, "What are you and mom talking about?" And you say, "Don't worry about it. We're just speaking QR." And then you go, QR. And that means, Kevin, now you want to know what that means? And this is brilliant. This is brilliant. Do you want to know what that means?
Yeah, I'm on the edge of my seat.
When you go to a restaurant and they say, "We've gone paperless with our menu, but you can use your phone to scan this." What do you scan?
You QR code it up, yeah.
Uh-huh. So when you're speaking in lingo to someone, kind of like Pig Latin, you're speaking in QR, which is code. Kids will love this. I just came up with it. Kids will love it. As a matter of fact, just so you know, Eddie, do you happen to have the breaking news sounder if you could?
No, I think Zetta's broken right now, Jake.
It's been proposed to me right now. Surfside is coming. Could come out with the hip combo. Join the latest, coolest rocket ship of beverages, Surfside and QR. No more 6'7". See?
Gosh, man.
Listen.
Thank the Lord we're in the final half hour of the week.
You guys both have opportunity to get on this train. You either get on, it's leaving the station. It's leaving the station, and we're
No.
I mean, you don't have to be on the train if you don't want to.
I think my ticket's stuck in the snowbank with the Benedict Mathurin statue.
Last question, Kev. We got a week before it happens, but you're rooting for who in the Super Bowl?
Well, rooting for the Seahawks. I do think New England can make it much more interesting than people think. And I know the Drake May, illness shoulder is a little weird, but I don't know. I feel like people are really writing off New England way too early.
No, I would agree with that. And I'd like to see Seattle as well. Again, they are Ospreys. That is the Seahawk. A large bird, according to Kevin's son. All right, Kevin, enjoy the weekend. Appreciate the time as always.
Praying for you, Eddie. See you, boys.
So he's on my team in terms of the snowbank, okay? But I'm telling you, you could already feel the wave of the QR. Eddie, you don't want to admit it, but you thought about it last night, did you not?
No. It never once came through my brain last night. And I was up until 2 a.m. No, it did not. I
would like for this. This is all I'm asking. This is all I'm asking, okay? I don't ask for a lot. I'm low maintenance. Would you agree I'm low maintenance?
Well, the text line of people that are saying, please stop with the QR, I can't say some of these words, but I'll say stuff.
What? Listen, it's all in good fun. But
maybe for you.
But I'm low maintenance, right?
Sure.
I am.
Sure.
You don't have to do a lot.
I have to deal with this.
Okay, fine.
The fixation of things when something's not there.
Oh, well, we'll disagree there. All I ask of the people of this fine city is that if someone sees Eddie in public, they walk up to him and simply say, QR. That's it. And this week, on Monday, I'm going to wager.
I'm with Jeremy of Cicero here. Feel the wave of nausea.
No. Again, I listen. I get it. If I hadn't thought of it myself, I would also be nauseous of envy.
There's a growing amount of people that are saying, Eddie, I pray for you. You've got it. 30 more minutes, and then you're done with him for the week.
How about this? He's smiling while saying it.
It's just he knows it's so dumb.
He knows it's awesome.
No.
Nick doesn't seem thrilled. I'm telling you. Hey, Jake, it's Eric and Fishers. I was curious if Jake received the gift I sent him in December. Eric, I will have to look. I apologize. I need to look to see if that, in the move, things got a little bit wonky. It is a Friday. That means that it is a Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday, and it comes with a little bit of a different twist this week, which we will be doing in 2026. And it is not the sophomoric hijinks of QR, but it is something that's going to make you feel good and good for the heart, and we'll do it next.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
I did just get a text from someone saying that the lingo's catching on in Fort Wayne.
No, it's not.
Just telling you.
You're lying.
That makes me feel good. Does my heart good to hear that, right? People are on board with it.
No.
But on a serious note, Franciscan Health has partnered with us for the last couple of years, and I'm honored for that fact. And the the number of people, and I know folks on this program, we joke around, we have fun. I get, do I obsess over things sometimes? Maybe, right? I get it. But I do truly appreciate that people do tune in just to have fun with us and to hear some sports. And, we like to treat it kind of just like, like a sports bar or a hangout where you're just hanging out talking sports. That's what this should all be about. But at the same time, the number of people, and I know that I've said this a lot, and I understand and I truly do appreciate the patience people have of knowing that on Fridays at 2:30, we're going to give you a little bit of information about heart health, because it is something for which, I take it a responsibility I take personally and I take seriously. And Franciscan has been outstanding in giving us the information and helping out with the platform towards helping people when it comes to cardiovascular health. And one of the things that we had a meeting at the end of last year, and they said, the thing, Jake, that we really need to reach towards is the number of women that may not think about heart health. And I said, that's probably true, because when you think about the stereotype of the heart attack, the Sanford and Son, the grabber, whatever it may be, or when you think about in movies a character that has a heart attack, it is more often than not stereotypically a male that you think of. And it just becomes labeled as like the heart attack is there's a heart attack called the widow maker. It's not called the maker of the widower, because we condition ourselves to think that this is something that is a predominantly male thing. And for those of you listening right now, the majority of you are probably men, but you've got mothers, you've got sisters, you've got wives, and it is alarming to think that the leading cause of death for women in the United States is heart-related, heart disease. And part of the problem, or the challenge I'll use rather as the better word, is that the symptoms when it comes to a female heart attack are not the same as that of a man. With a guy, I can tell you, I've said my left arm went immediately numb, and then I just started sweating profusely. In women, it may be something more like extreme fatigue, nausea, a pain in the jaw, a pain in the shoulders. And oftentimes it's related to, for example, if you had gone through menopause before the age of 40, if you had pregnancy complications, those are things that can then later be attached to or create cardiovascular problems. So we're going to make sure over the course of 2026 that we speak to the importance of women as well for the heart scan and other such things. And in that capacity, we're going to be celebrating women's sports throughout 2026. Like simply, for example, this week, reminding all of you that when it comes to high school athletics and the IHSAA, which is the building block and the foundation principle of learning the important things that one should learn throughout life. The number of people I talk to that myself included, that, hey, did you play sports in high school? And a lot of people will say, I played until like sophomore year, and then once it got into the varsity level, I probably wasn't good enough, so I had to find another way to be involved. I was a manager for the team, or in my case, I was the broadcaster for the team, or I simply enjoyed going and watching the games and following around and going to the different things, but learning to watch from the sideline. And all of those things that happen throughout sports, that's the real principle of it. That and teamwork and sportsmanship are the IHSAA's goals. And simply want to say this week, because we talk so much about Hoosier hysteria and boys basketball and sectional time, it's got to be snowy it's got to be sectionals because it's snowy outside, which we'll experience in another month. But Eddie, you came in here during basically the great blizzard of 26 so far. You and Greg Rakestraw and I believe Mark Dykton were all in here for a big show that you guys did on Sunday night, correct?
Yeah, the IHSA state tournament pairing show for sectionals on Sunday, yes.
So the girls' sectionals getting set to get underway. They will begin on February 3rd, so upcoming this week, and then the 4th, 6th, and 7th. So we are into now girls sectionals. Those pairings have been announced, and this week is when all of the young ladies throughout Indiana will be taken to the basketball floor. And yes, Hoosier hysteria means basketball in general, not just isolated to the boys. So I would strongly encourage everybody to go out, support the women that are learning those same values, those same principles, because learning basketball, learning whatever sport it might be in high school athletics or even younger, at its core is supposed to be about preparing you for the things that happen later in life. Just like the initiatives that we're going to try to take for women when it comes to heart disease, and knowing that that is the leading cause of death in the United States, knowing that 1 in 3 women in terms of deaths in the United States may at some point have had some sort of a complication of heart disease. And what are the things that you can do, especially when those signs and symptoms are trickier than with a man? It's simply to be proactive, like getting a heart scan. A $49 heart scan from Franciscan Health, which is number 1 in the state when it comes to interventional coronary care, number 1 when it comes to cardiology by health grades. And that $49 heart scan is so simple. It's non-invasive. It does not take long at all, and just $49 you can pay out of pocket, and you go in, and with the heart scan where you get a scan of your heart to find out the calcium buildup in your heart, you also get a heart health risk assessment. So you get kind of that roadmap on where you are and where you need to be in terms of heart health. And guys that are listening, I strongly encourage you to talk to the women in your life about the importance of that, especially if they're over the age of 40. And you can find out more about the heart scans themselves at 833-238-0688. That's 833-238-0688. Or you can always find the information at franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles. As I always say as well, most of you at this point probably have written down my cell number at some point because I say it on the air on the regular. Anytime, day or night, if you need information on it, send me a text. I will happily get back to you. And I appreciate those that have sent me their stories about getting a heart scan and finding out, whoa, like, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I was preemptive about it. We'll come back. J&B is here. We will do the crossover, find out what he's got cooking for his last show of the week. We'll do it on the other side here. It's Query & Company, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
What did you say your plans are for the weekend, Eddie?
So I have Pacers and who do they play tomorrow night? Atlanta Hawks.
The Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, I've got that tomorrow night. I'm not sure what the day plans will consist of tomorrow, and then hanging out with some coworkers tonight. And I'm not sure what we're doing on Sunday
really?
yet. Yeah.
Looking around where that invitation might have gotten off to.
Well, see, Jake, if you weren't so adamant on this whole QR thing taking off, you might have gotten.
Oh no,
an
there's
invite.
no adamancy. I mean, this is just I'm just spitting facts.
What in the world?
Everything okay in there?
JMV just threw like a stress ball at the window. I thought something was coming from my life there.
Well, okay, fair enough. Yeah, Pacers Hawks tomorrow night. And are we going to be seeing a preview of perhaps a Pacer or a player that could end up with the Pacers or that they have interest in? We had that discussion earlier today. That conversation will be up in podcast form.
What are you doing this weekend, Jake?
I am going tonight. We are going to dinner with my cousin and his wife, and I think probably what's going to happen is Shannon and then my cousin's wife, Julie, are going to sit there and listen to us talk about the Oasis concert for 2 hours. Which probably is how that's going to work out. And then tomorrow night we'll be at the game, obviously. So look forward to the weekend itself. Somebody asked this question, which is a good one.
Oh, goodness.
Hey, Jake, any chance you can do the QR in your pirate voice?
No.
Now that's a whole other element.
Why? I can. I swear that's probably
QR. Okay. How much fun is that, by the way? Speaking of J&B, the crossover's upcoming, brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air. Love-HVAC.com is the website. 317-353-2141 is the telephone number for the very best when it comes to heating and cooling, and this time of year in particular. Want to absolutely make sure, an official Heil heating and cooling dealer, that the furnace is going. And think about, you do not want to have this time of year all of a sudden that furnace go out and think, oh man, I should have gone with the people that Jake was telling me about that has the 24-hour on-call maintenance. That is correct. You should have done that. And the good guys at Love Heating and Air, if you're going to be bringing people into your home, you want to make sure that they are folks you can trust and folks that are going to also have great product and integrity. And you get all of that with Love Heating and Air, and they sponsor each and every day the crossover talk when JMV arrives and what it is that he has upcoming on his show. Earlier today also, you probably saw it, there were two big items of news in relation to IndyCar. The first, the announcement that tentatively it looks as though IndyCar will have a race in Washington, D.C. on the weekend of August 23rd that will utilize Pennsylvania Avenue as well as the mall, and the different monuments could be on display based on the track that they come up with. This will be called the America 250 Grand Prix. It will be a celebration of the 250th year of the United States. And the one thing I will say, and I guess it would not have been possible to do it on July 4th or that weekend. I mean, IndyCar will already be in Mid-Ohio for that weekend, but that's the one thing that you would think that if you're doing it, but I would imagine there are obviously much bigger and, already set in stone plans in the nation's capital for the 4th. And so therefore August 23rd. We had not, as contracted employees of IndyCar, we had not definitively heard anything about that at all until this announcement came today. I think there was the level of discussion was essentially what most of you had heard of, just, rumors and rumblings and that sort of thing. But when President Trump announced it earlier today, I did not see it, but from what I read, Roger Penske as well as Fox executives were there. So that would lead you to believe that this is a certainty. There are going to be a lot of logistical challenges they need to work through in order to, come up with a track and figure out how they're going to do it, and the layout, and also just the, when you start putting up the barriers, the fencing, the security, not to create the track. That is a process that's going to be taking place over the summer in Washington, D.C., and we'll see if they're able to get that done. I thought when we went to Baltimore, and if I had to guess, that was 2014 and 15, somewhere in there. We went twice. I loved it. I loved that area. I loved the fans in Baltimore when we went there. It was unbelievable. The attendance, especially the first year, it was incredible going around Camden Yards. So it was very, very cool. Also, Tim Cindric, who was out as the president of Penske Racing last year after the scandal in the Indy 500 with, and I can't even remember now.
The attenuator?
Attenuator. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. The attenuator that was altered and they were not supposed to be, and then you added that to the previous scandal of the push to pass at St. Pete. And Tim Cindric was one of 3 at Penske Racing that was, that moved on or were asked to move on. He is now back with Penske Racing and will be the race strategist for Scott McLaughlin for the year. I did communicate with him yesterday, and he is going out of town and going to be out of town, I think, next week. And so I would imagine that after that, I would love to get him on the show and just get his thoughts and perspectives on that.
Who was he previously the strategist for?
He has done primarily, he's kind of done all of them, but Newgarden and Power notably.
Right.
And then McLaughlin as well.
So he's now it's obviously with Team Penske now it's Scott McLaughlin, Joseph Newgarden, and David Malukas, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
With Will Power moving on to Team Andretti?
Will Power, yes, will be in the car that Colton Herta vacated by going over into the Formula One ranks. So IndyCar had their content days earlier this week.
Yeah, the last 2 days, yeah.
And so the stage is set. It's hard to believe St. Pete will be here absolutely before we know it. And which is, again, like it goes by quick, the off season.
Is the Spaniard going to do it again? Will he win the series? I mean, at this point, more than likely, right?
You're talking about Palou?
Yeah.
Boy,
it's so hard to
he is so
bet
in a
against,
rhythm.
right?
Yeah, it is. Now, I do think, though, that I would anticipate, like Newgarden had such a down year last year. I mean, it was bizarre. And I can't imagine that slump continues for Joseph Newgarden. So I would think that Joseph Newgarden is also going to be, and as well, McLaughlin. I mean, McLaughlin was 10th in points last year. Those guys will have a good shot. Christian Lundgaard as well. And Pato O'Ward, it goes without saying. Speaking of Pato O'Ward, J&V just walked in.
Yes.
You're all excited, aren't you?
How about that? So I roll up to the Goodwill at Nora, Meridian Hills, basically, and find 4 McLaren shirts. And on the tag, they all say Pato O'Ward on the back of the shirt. So I'm assuming that's where he lives up there. I'm assuming that's Pato O'Ward's clothes.
That's probably right.
I bought them for my son. I go, hey, we got to have that. So I bought them.
You got to get him to sign one of them. Just, you know what I mean?
I know. I actually sent a message on X, and I said, man, look what I found right here. But, yeah, Blake's
Did he respond?
ecstatic. Hasn't yet, huh?
That's
Hasn't
pretty
yet.
cool,
But
though.
I'm assuming that's his. So
Yes,
that was the McLaren wardrobe that was.
Correct. That's correct.
What was that about? Did he drove for McLaren, or did he try F1?
He still is.
Right now, but, I mean, in F1, was that?
Oh, he's a test driver for them.
Okay. I gotcha.
So, yeah. So that's pretty awesome.
That's
gotta
pretty
be
awesome.
what that is.
Well,
yeah.
it had to be because his name is like on the back of it right there. It's like inside the collar that his name is there.
And you're right. He does live on the north side somewhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know exactly where, but, Erickson lives in that area as well. But what's on the big show today?
We're going to do, I think somebody from, I don't know where, I think Don's going to be out today because he's on a flight. We'll talk a little bit about the weekend of college basketball with IU, Purdue, get you set for a lot of things as well. Ray from Telemundo, Jake, gave me this miniature soccer ball for when I remarked when he walked out of here the other day and he had this like fur coat on.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What in the world is happening? One of these days, we're all going to go out and drink with him.
He's great.
He is an awesome dude.
He's a native of Venezuela, Ray, our coworker.
I'm going to have to go back through, I think, Spanish 1 and 2 because I kind of goofed off in high school during those courses. Sometimes I struggle. My hearing's not great anyway, but he is a tremendous dude.
Let me see the little soccer ball. This is nice.
Yeah, it's an advertiser right there. Give him a little bit of love that's on the soccer ball.
Floor and decor.
Floor and decor.
Tile, wood, and stone. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool little soccer ball. By the way, Indiana, UCLA, tomorrow, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock pregame show right here on this radio station. Purdue and Maryland will be on Sunday, on 93 WIBC, our sister station. On
You guys
Saturday.
going to be listening tomorrow night, you and Shannon?
Oh, yeah.
You going to the
We're
Pacer?
going to the Pacer game.
Yeah.
We'll be listening on the way home. She'll probably request some sort of band that requires Aquanet.
Tomorrow is whatever, which is always the wildest of they're wild anyway, but they really get loose.
She'll want Rat or
Because I can
Dokken.
defend anything. Like, I've been listening to X-Clan here recently.
Oh, they're the best.
So I'm
Graham
going
Verbalizer, what time is it?
Yes. A Funkin' Lesson will get played tomorrow night, Jake. I promise you.
Great songs.
Yes.
Deeper than Atlantis. Deeper than the seafloor. Travel
It
by
is.
Mantis, the best.
His voice, he may have the greatest
Great.
voice
They're
of
great.
all time.
All right, John's up next. We'll be back with you at noon on Monday, and I thank you for listening to Query and Company.